live stream, and a special welcome to those who have chosen to present today, both virtually and in person. So this is the first information gathering part of the meeting, and the normal process is for the submitter to be given 5 minutes to speak to their submission, and then a further 5 minutes of questions, but a total of 10 minutes altogether. The questions from elected members to the submitter to clarify matters raised in the submission only and not to give opinions. Questions posed by submitters to council are not normally answered in this setting. Specific common questions are often answered in the response to submitters at the end of the process. So submitters are welcome to stay and listen to all the submissions that we'll hear today. So the first person is James McKenzie. Is James, are you there, James?
Yes, yep.
Okay. So welcome, James. I hope you're down off Mount Hutt, and you're welcome to give your submission. Would you like to just chat to your submission at this stage before we do questions?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I guess the only thing that's a little bit odd about my my submission is that I think that the provisions are working well, so yes. And would I like to see any changes to the policy? No. But then I've said if yes, please explain the changes. So the changes, really, I think the policy as it stands just needs to be strengthened with a little bit more of a sort of a process risk-driven I guess a risk-driven process that's a bit more visible to the applicants. And what I've touched on here, and I'll read it, my concern is that licensing decisions and the conditions associated with licensing are very subjective. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute with a good example, as opposed to objective, you know. So essentially, when you've got a few people involved in making a decision, let's just take, for example, the first, part of the process where there's 3 or 4 decision makers involved, that can be appealed, of course, and then it goes to a broader group. But those people have quite obviously a significant influence and impact on the outcome of the process, and it's unclear to the applicants as to what their criteria are for making a decision other than the Liquor Licensing Act, which can be interpreted in many different ways. So my suggestion here is a bit of a more data-driven consultative process would give us greater visibility of, or the applicants greater visibility of the decision-making process, give us an opportunity to challenge the premise upon which decisions are made, and I've suggested that the council consider adopting a model with a defined set of criteria and weighting and scoring that would improve the optics of the decision-making process. The example I'd like to cite is in relation to Mount Hutt, where we have, on a day like today, we have strong winds. And we used to have a point where the top lift operator would make a decision as to whether or not it was safe or not to operate the lift. And depending on their background, their experience, and how they felt on the day, they might decide that the lift's operational or not. And that process meant that there was no certainty as to what the outcome might be and whether or not, we would need to open the mountain at all for a particular day. By changing it from the person making a decision based on what they thought and felt, we had some wind thresholds introduced. We did this quite a few years ago, and it just made the whole thing a lot easier. Everyone understood what was going on. The guests we could explain to about why it was that we weren't operating and what we were looking for to get the chair turning. And for the staff, it took away the pressure for them to make a call because it was using a data or threshold level. It also meant that we were able to consistently apply a wind management plan, regardless of who was working on the day and regardless of what the weather was doing, and it would be safe and consistent. And then obviously we would review those thresholds from time to time to make sure whether they're safe or need to be reviewed based on observations that go along the way. And I think something similar here would be quite good. And just as a way of another example, in recent liquor license, well, not so much recent, but in liquor license applications I've done, I've had particular bits of erroneous anecdote thrown back at me as to why there shouldn't be necessarily an application granted. One being for the ice bar at Mount Hutt, where there was a concern that people would be skiing under the influence of alcohol. that they were happy for the restaurants down in the base area to serve alcohol, but when we introduced the concept of a nice bar at the sort of mid-mountain point, there was a real sort of concern, certainly from the health perspective, that people would be skiing under the influence of alcohol. Now, the irony of that decision, of course, is that that conjecture was that it wasn't data-driven; it was felt. And of course, if you take it apart, its logical conclusion: someone could have a drink of wine or a beer in the base area, jump on a lift, and then still be skiing with alcohol in their system that we've sold and legitimately, and that was acceptable to the licensing committee. So, of course, if they drink the beer halfway up the mountain, they're still just as much at the same sort of level of risk. So that risk and that understanding of the risk wasn't really well understood, and it was definitely a sort of a contention during that process. And similarly at a Puki, when we put in our application around the ability to serve to patrons who were bathing in the pools, as opposed to the and this was the whole thing, is that people were happy for us to serve or the licensing committee were happy for us to serve alcohol in the restaurant right next to the pool, and patrons could then go straight into the pool directly thereafter. But without any data or proof, they were very concerned around the fact that people could purchase the alcohol in the pool and consume it there, as opposed to having a couple of drinks and then jumping in the pool. So. And then the lack of data surrounding the concern was also a major issue. And so we got through that process, and in the end, we had the decision went in our favour. But it was a very protracted process. We were unable to be involved in the discussions really after this initial submission. And, we just felt it was just out there, a particularly significant sort of component of an offering in a tourism, reasonably significant tourism attraction that was in the hands of a couple of people, where the owner and the applicant really didn't have the ability to be involved in explaining the rationale, how the decision was being made, the sort of controls and measures that were put in place. They were almost sort of put to the side, and it was just left out there for a number of months. And then it turned out an application was granted on the day that we opened, which was frustrating, because for the lead up and the planning and everything that we did in the lead up to that, we had a multi-million-dollar complex sitting there with a huge question mark over its, what potentially is a massive point of difference, and that has actually been a key enabler for the enterprise to be successful. So that is my suggestion. I agree that the policy is working well in terms of controls and minimising harm, and I think that's incredibly important. We have to be very careful about the information and data that's submitted in this process. I've read the Te Whatu Ora submission, where alcohol is compared against a whole load of illegal drugs and listed as the #1 drug that is out there, that is a problem in our community. Of course, the thing that's missing from that is that the alcohol is legal, and all the other things that they're comparing it against are illegal. So, of course, the data is going to be substantially skewed. So we have to be really careful when we look at data in this process. So whoever works through this process of making potentially a more data-driven, clearer process needs to be able to do this with the unblinkered approach to assessing what are the things that are really important in an application and a decision-making process.
Thanks, James. Okay, questions from councillors, please. Any questions? Okay. Thanks, James. We don't have any questions, so thanks very much for your submission, and we'll do our deliberations later on this afternoon.
Oh well. Thanks very much for your work, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well done. Cheers.
Okay. Our next person is Jennifer Lamb. Jennifer, are you there, Jennifer?
I am, and I hope you can hear me.
Oh, we can hear you. Okay. Would you like to talk to your submission?
I will, and a sunny day in Auckland at last. Kia ora, good morning. I'm Jennifer Lamb, and this is Lizzie Barrett, and we make this submission on behalf of Alcohol Health Watch, and we're a national organisation that is working to reduce alcohol harm and inequities. We want to Firstly, we want to commend Ashburton District Council on having a local alcohol policy and for undertaking this review and giving us the opportunity to make this submission. As you will be aware from your research and consultation, alcohol places a significant burden on the Ashburton District and in fact the whole region and nationally. And as you know, or as we know, presentations at emergency departments that are alcohol related are an underestimate of the total burden of disease that particularly affect vulnerable groups such as those at greater risk, young people, Māori and those in high socioeconomic deprivation areas. You will be aware, or you'll also be aware, that the higher density of alcohol outlets and the longer trading hours results in greater accessibilities, sales, consumption and harm. And that settings, if you set limits on these elements by a local alcohol policy, that can reduce that harm. I also wanted to say that there is a good reason that the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act requires that a local alcohol policy must be reviewed at least every 6 years. This enables the policy to be current and reflect community feedback and research such as changes in demographics, crime and other statistics, such as the rate of referrals to the Ashburton Community and Drug Service and other data reported to Council. In addition, the revised local alcohol policy can take into account recent and relevant matters, importantly, the Supreme Court decision on Auckland Council's proposed local alcohol policy and the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Community Participation Bill that is being debated in Parliament currently, and other local territorial local authorities local alcohol policies that have gone further than this alcohol policy. While this research and other information is available to the Council, it does not appear to be reflected in this draft local alcohol policy, and we consider that the Council has not made best use of the opportunity to add further measures in preventing alcohol-related harm. Such measures include a cap or sinking lid on licence numbers, a policy on restricting further licences, a policy on the location of premises in relation to proximity to other licensed premises or to sensitive sites such as educational facilities, marae, places of worship, playgrounds, medical centres and so forth. These are measures that are supported by the statutory officers, the Medical Officer of Health, the Licensing Inspector, the New Zealand Police, as well as agencies such as ours, and could and should be included in the local alcohol policy. So it is disappointing to see that the Council staff have recommended that the current local alcohol policy be rolled over without considering other measures or even reconsidering trading hours, which are, in the case of on-licence opening hours, even earlier than the default time in the Act. The reasons given in the review of local alcohol policy report that went to Council on the 7th of June this year, making changes to the policy require further public consultation and opens the appeals process, which could cause delays and be costly for ratepayers. We believe that this reasoning should be reviewed in light of the Supreme Court case, the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Community Participation Amendment Bill, as we've said, and views of the statutory officers and the community. So it is a pity that the provisions were not consulted on initially, that additional provisions weren't consulted on additionally, but we believe that it's not too late to undertake a thorough review of the local alcohol policy, which may result in additional protections that would make alcohol less accessible and meet the object of the Act. Our written submission outlines our recommendations in more detail, and once you've had considered them, we hope that they will be reflected in this revised local alcohol policy. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jennifer. Questions from councillors? Any councillors have questions? Councillor Cameron.
Thank you very much for your. Where do I look?
Speak in the microphone.
Oh, thank you very much for your submission. I was reading it the other day, and I clicked on, and I'm probably being very lazy, so excuse me. Reference 1, I wanted to see some evidence of harm being caused by increased hours and increased outlets, etc. And I clicked on reference 1, and it takes me to reflect current evidence data. We suggest that the local alcohol policy needs to be revised and strengthened. And I clicked on reference 1 and I got a whole lot of statistics. I could see cigarette smoking, but I couldn't see alcohol incidents or what that means or the data of increasing alcohol. Can you help me understand that? Was the statistics...
So apologies for that. What it should have clicked on was statistics from that summarises a lot of things from Ashburton District Council, including alcohol and also the population demographics, for example.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was looking at a reference that suggests that that causes harm as per the sentence beforehand. I misunderstood. I didn't get... I know the population of Ashburton. I just didn't see that... it's just got here... we suggest that there needs to be revised and strengthened to reflect current evidence and data. And so you were suggesting...
It's a general data because,
Okay, sure.
as I said in the submission, your demographics has changed. I know, for example, you're a refugee resettlement settlement now. A whole lot of things have changed, the crime statistics, etc.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Any further questions? If not, thank you, Jennifer, for your input. Some of the suggestions that you raised, I'm sure, will be discussed later on this morning. Thanks for your input. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, our next person is Paul Radish.
Oh, I might just say on.
She wants to listen. Hey there, Paul.
Morning, everyone. How are you this morning?
Very well. We can't see you, but we can hear you, so we'll carry on. If you'd like to talk to your submission for 3 or 4 minutes, and then we can ask questions if need be.
Some would see it not seeing me as an advantage, sir. I'll be very brief. We support the retention of the LAP in its current format. It provides us with some certainty in terms of future development and certainly makes it easy for our stores. You'll be encouraged by some parties to make changes and to add further restrictions. We think the LAP in Ashburton is doing its job in terms of reducing alcohol-related harm, and we support the council's current position. I don't really have anything further to add to that, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Do the councillors have any questions? No? It appears not, Paul. We seem to be happy with your submission. Thanks very much for zooming in, and we'll deliberate later on this morning and this afternoon on your points.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Well, we have a real person now. Robert, how would you like to come forward? Yes. And if you just push the button on the right, it'll go red. That's it.
Great.
So if you'd like to speak to your submission, and then if there's any questions, we can go from there.
Sure. No, thanks, Tony. Appreciate that. Thank you all, and appreciate being able to come along and speak to this. I'll probably be reasonably brief as well, so speed your morning up a little bit. Look, I think the big thing is that the LAP we've got in place at the moment works reasonably well. It sets out a clear plan. It's easy to follow. It's reasonably sensible, but there's just a couple of things in terms of how it's focused that we find a bit challenging. And I think the first thing is the way the policy is written is it's focused on negativity. I guess, like anything, if we want to, I mean, the whole purpose of the policy is to make Ashburton a better place, to have less alcohol-related harm, and to do that we need the buy-in of the people. And I guess the way it's written and the way that the two options were worded, it was sort of almost a negative finger-pointing exercise, whereas really what we want are those people that the policy applies to have some buy-in and to come along for the ride, because they're the ones that are going to make the difference in the district. So I think that focusing on those negatives isn't the best approach. We want to make the town a better place, but reducing harm from alcohol has to be a key part of that plan. Those two things go hand in hand. You're not going to have a positive and vibrant hospitality district if you've got significant harm from from alcohol, and also if you've got crime and things associated with it. So bringing those people together is where it's key. The second thing is it's important that we have a level playing field for all. The current policy includes an objective to provide a consistent approach to licensing throughout the district. With respect to one-way door restrictions, we really can't see any way that that the district benefits from a different set of rules for rural and urban. We get frustration around this as to why two groups should be treated differently. And we want to ensure that this objective is applied to all aspects of the policy when it's considered, especially when discretion is able to be used. And the last point I want to make is around the proliferation of bottle stores in the district. These new stores very rarely offer anything new, and it's hard to see how they offer anything positive to our community. We constantly hear about areas of the country where there's bottle stores on every corner, and I don't think any of us want to see this in our community. And I think consideration needs to be given to whether we should restrict the number of new stores and how that should be done. So thank you. That's
Thank you, Robert.
key points I've got.
Do we have any questions of Robert? Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Mr Chairman. Welcome, Rob. Just thinking about the one-way door policy, and I know it's in Ashburton, but not in anywhere else. Just wondering, practically, how would you operate a one-way door system, say like Rakaia or Mount Somers, where there might only be 10 people in the venue compared to 100 or 200 in Ashburton? Practically operate.
Well, probably exactly the same way. You'll find there'll be a number of sites in Ashburton that have a small number of people at that hour of the night, and they've got to negotiate those rules, and meet the objectives of the LAP. It's in a lot of ways unfair to say, well, actually, if you're in town and you're open, you have to find a way to make this work, whereas if in your country, don't worry about it. And I know that in the country you'll have, generally smaller numbers of people. Apologies if I sound like I'm pointing the finger at Methven, but if you've got a large event happening at a pub in Methven at that hour of the night, that's shouldn't be treated any differently to if one of the bars in town here has a large event of the same scale. And I think what it does too is you've got customers coming into the bars at that hour of the night who see different sets of rules in different parts of the district, and they don't understand why they're being kicked out or not allowed back in when they're in town, but they go to Methven and say, okay, well let's we can just go in here, no problem. Why are you treating us differently? I think that creates issues when you're dealing with customers at that hour of the night.
Thanks, Rob. Good.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? If not, thanks, Robert, for your submission. You're more than welcome to stay and listen to others and have a cup of tea with us later on if you wish.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay. We now have Matthew, Angela and Portia. Please come forward. So we've received a very good lengthy submission from you people, so if you'd like to speak briefly to it, and then if there's any questions.
Kia ora. So thank you for having us here today. I'll just introduce...
Just push your button on the right there.
Red button, sorry.
Yep, there, right.
You're both on that. Now you'll really hear me. So kia ora, I'm Ange Ledley. I'll just let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Kia ora, Dr. Matthew Reid. I'm Medical Officer of Health.
Kia ora, Portia Sutherland, and I'm a health promoter focused on alcohol harm reduction.
Thank you. And so my role at the moment is the interim manager of our South Canterbury office, and I'm also the program manager for our alcohol program across all our areas, which include right up to Kaikoura, right down to Mackenzie and across on the West Coast. So we work in a team. I was trying to figure out what the key points to say to you in 5 minutes might be about the work we do, which is a bit of a challenge because it's quite a stretch. So we thought we'd use the opportunity to just really introduce ourselves. We've been involved with liquor licensing and alcohol prevention work for a number of years, but only in June last year we took over the contract from ECADS in terms of liquor licensing, and so we've just been working in that space closely with our tri-agency partners, police and council, and working through a few processes around that. I'm just going to hand over to Matt to talk about the next part of our chat.
Yeah, so I guess our overall approach is to view alcohol as causing preventable harm, and that we would like to see the consumption of alcohol reduce over time to reduce that harm. Taking alcohol harm, it's very broad, of course. It causes harm to individuals that consume alcohol and to those around them and more broadly people in society. So that's our starting point. We want to reduce consumption. Having said that, we congratulate Ashburton District Council for having a local alcohol policy, which not every council, of course, around the country has achieved. And we definitely think it should stay in place. And we'd just like to see some adjustments that we think would bring it into line with best practice of local alcohol policies around the country.
What we do know from our work is that education alone doesn't work in this space, if only, if we could tell our children do this and they would just do that, it'd be fabulous. But unfortunately that's not the case, and what the evidence tells us is that we really need a multi-pronged approach. We need to provide an environment that's supportive of healthy choices, and that's where we think the local alcohol policy makes a huge difference in this space and has a lot of influence on how our community views alcohol. We do welcome the opportunity for further discussion, and I'd liken some of the work that we have done around tobacco control in this community. You've been a real leader in the smoke-free, particularly around smoke-free playgrounds, areas in alfresco dining, and so really commend you on some of the brave moves that you made. I think we were one of the first in the country to have a smoke-free playground, and I do commend you for the work you're doing in this space. The tweaks that we're seeing is just from when we first did this policy and where we are now. We know a whole lot more, and this is where we can really see it being strengthened. Also, just want to reiterate, there's no commercial interest for us. We have no gain other than trying to enhance the well-being of our community. We aren't in these careers for the money. It's just pretty much our passion, and so we welcome further discussion in any of this space. I just acknowledge Portia's work. She's been our brains behind the whole submission and done a fantastic job of presenting the evidence, but this is just a touch on what she could be providing you, so if there's room and scope to have discussions about that, we're happy to do that.
Mm-hmm. Kia ora. Thanks, Angela. So we are a wee bit ahead of time, so if you do want to expand on any points, you're more than welcome. If Portia wants to say a few words, she's more than welcome. Oh, sorry. Sorry, before you do, Liz, is it Liz?
No, I can wait.
Okay,
Yep.
there you go.
Oh, no, I think it's...
Yeah, we'll lead from you. How's
Okay.
it, Liz?
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks for your submission. I'm just reading point number 19. So your stats are from 2016. Is there nothing later than that? That seems like quite a long time ago, and I see you're comparing the Ashburton district with Christchurch on number of establishments, and I'm sure Christchurch has got a lot more now than that.
Was point 19?
Yes. So you've got 2016 stats on the density of licensed premises. I'm sure that would have changed, but how?
Well, it would have changed, but the density is per head of capita is what we're working with
Yes.
here, and so we are. I think we're sitting slightly higher. Yes, not quite as high as some of our other areas. So, yeah.
Yeah, and sorry, unfortunately, that's just you know, there is that we are using somewhat historical data. You're right, 7 years ago, and Christchurch City could well have changed post earthquake, particularly. Yeah, and it's just a matter of data availability. We could.
Thank you. And I suppose the same one is on number 23 with Methven. That's 2018 with 1,400 residents. It's just hard to compare when I'm sure a lot of things have changed in the last 5 years.
It'd be fair to say that some of these data would have been updated, but you know, a lot of attention went into COVID over the last year. So yeah.
And we have taken into consideration that Methven in winter looks a lot different to what it does in the summer. Although that may change with the new attractions, but yeah.
Caroline.
My question's along the same lines, and I asked the previous submitters the same question. When I go to reference number 1, it takes me to a study that talks about 12 to 17-year-olds. Presumably 17-year-olds aren't allowed to drink. I don't have to show their ID before they go to, drinking age is 18. I just wonder, do we have a similar study for adults, or can we, to you particularly, Doctor, can it be extrapolated? I understood that youth had a more sensitive sort of mind and they can be more affected by alcohol and methamphetamine and things and marijuana than adults. So do we have a similar study that we can look at adults? Because our local alcohol policy asks that people are over 18 before they go into public bars to drink.
Yes, of course. So that's the New Zealand drug harms ranking study, and I'm not, you know, intimately familiar with that study, but it did look at youth and adults, but separately, and then across the total population.
Sure.
So if you look a bit deeper into that study, you'll find it does include
talk
data
about adults, because it's just got in the conclusion and in the interest between 12 and 17-year-olds, and it was a youth study. Harm to youth was I understand was the objective of the clinical trial.
Yes, as well as it's not a clinical trial. It's
a study.
Yeah, it's a study, multi-criteria decision analysis.
Yeah, something like that.
So, and it looked at all drugs, legal and illegal, and just referencing Mr. Mackenzie's point, tobacco was one of the drugs they considered, and the harm from that. That's also legal, as was alcohol. But they also looked at methamphetamine, synthetic cannabis, and all the rest. So, and they looked at the harms that can be equated from all those different drugs, and found when you take in the broad, as we were saying before, the broad harm that alcohol causes, it is the most harmful drug, and yeah.
In terms of health and inequity and money and social concerns and stuff, is it?
Cancer.
Yeah.
Social, you know, the injuries, domestic violence. All those things.
Sort of excessive, because it's got the next point down. Continues to cause significant harms to people, whānau, and communities, and is a key driver of health and social inequities.
Yeah.
Right.
I think an important point is that all alcohol consumption causes harm. There is no safe lower limit. Of course, we talk about harmful consumption, which is more likely to cause harm, because, you know, excessive drinking, particularly in a short time. But all alcohol consumption causes harm. Even one beer a day is going to increase the risk, for example, of cancer.
Thank you.
Neil.
Point number 15, you talk about reducing trading hours as a recommendation. And the other points talk about reducing the opening hours by an hour, I think, which is fine. The closing hours, you're happy with them?
Yeah.
I mean, we looked at, I think, broadly speaking, Portia, you can add to this if you want, you know, what are the sort of standard hours across the country. It is a bit unusual to have 7 a.m. as opening hours. I think the default is 8 a.m. and that's the most common one across the country. We're closer to the usual, or you know, the standard in closing hours.
I think when we did this policy last, the earlier opening hours was put in for the shift workers who were finishing work at 5 or 6 in the morning, which is opposite to what we do. So it was giving them somewhere to go to if they wanted, or if someone wanted to open. I think that was the reasoning, but thanks for the submission.
Thank you. Just a comment to add. I appreciate while this policy focuses on your 18 plus to be in licences, but the influence that this policy can have on our young people, particularly with around exposure, and I think seeing a liquor store on the every corner is something I completely agree with Rob on. We don't want to see that because of the influence and making it a normal part of our everyday life isn't what we want to do. So that's where we're thinking about in terms of sensitive sites. While we are focusing on what's happening in our premises, we are thinking about creating an environment that is making our young people see positive behaviour rather than an alcohol store or vaping shop, as now the trend. Another whole story to talk about. Yeah.
I think it's interesting though when you say that on licence can open at 7 in the morning until 2 the following morning by choice, as evidenced in Meffin at the moment. They are closing early. They're closing 11 or 12. So they're making a business decision as to what hours they actually want to open. So while we're giving people the opportunity to open between 7 and 2 in the morning, they don't. So so then the commercial aspect comes into it too, doesn't it, really?
For sure.
Yeah. Any further questions? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Lynette.
I was just going to ask, there's a kind of a boom going on at the moment with low alcohol wine and beer, and that's sort of coming into the industry. Is there any studies being done on who's drinking what? You know, have we got a change of culture? Is there any studies looking and see how we're going with that? Because it would be quite interesting if we're having a bit of a turn, you know, it would be good.
Yeah, I've switched to low alcohol, or no alcohol sometimes. But I'm sorry, I'm not sure. We could look into that and come back to you if you'd like that information on what's
I think that
underway.
you know that would be a good start and start promoting it, because I think that's where we'll get change in society's thinking if we start getting them to go on the low.
Yep, and certainly the alcohol content by volume. If you're drinking the same volume of 5% or 2.5%, there's lower harm from 2.5%.
And it's certainly a requirement of their licence to provide low alcohol options, so that's definitely covered, particularly around special licences.
Phil.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Apologies for my lateness, everybody. I've just breezed through dry July and wondered if...
Well done.
Thank you. Wondered if there was any studies on your radar about domestic abuse in that month and stats. Something maybe to fire on your radar if it's not already there.
No, another one we could come back to you on. Sorry, we don't.
No, well, that would be police. So I'm meeting with police next week, so I can ask them if they have any stats, which I'm sure they will on call-outs.
Excellent.
Thank you. Any further questions? All done? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
people.
your time.
Okay. Join us for a cup of tea if you wish.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, next up, Philip Brown.
Is he related to the mayor? Because he certainly looks like him.
Yeah. Same haircut. Hey. Morning, Philip. You're more than welcome to speak to your submission, and then councillors may ask questions after that. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I believe we have a committee here. The policy is to reduce alcohol-related harm and disorderly behaviour. I was just wondering from the committee, before I start, how do you think, excuse me, how do you think you're going on this plan of of reducing harm?
I think, Philip, our role here today is to actually listen to your submission and for councillors to ask you questions, and then we can talk about any other issues in deliberations.
From what I can see, things are not very good. I come here as a concerned citizen of harm that I have seen related to alcohol. I've got nothing against alcohol. It's all the damage that happens to people when they get on it. And there's different levels of it. You might go and have a beer and you're fine. And I know, was it last year, there was a bad accident not far from where I live. There was one person killed. That really annoyed me. And probably one of the main reasons I'm here today, and is to bring in front of people just the harm that alcohol does to people. There was one person killed there, two others, I think they're maimed for life, different categories, and I know several people who have died from alcohol-related accidents. There have been 2 suicides near where I live, that they're directly related to alcohol. And I don't know how to solve this problem. You people on the committee, you might have better ideas. Cutting off alcohol is probably not going to work. You've got to get inside people and decide that they've got a better way of living in life. They've got to have better goals in life. Myself, I've never drunk. My father was an alcoholic, and I saw the damage that it does to people. He was a nice man when he was sober. And I've had my letterbox stolen from someone who came back from the hotel one night. I found out not long after that who did it, and I asked him why he did it. He said he was drunk. Well, it was his choice to go and drink. I've had machinery vandalised on 2 sites I've been working on, and there have been empty cans of beer around on those sites. It's quite obvious what happened there. Young people, they get a bit of alcohol into them and they're just uncontrollable. I think with alcohol, you're playing Russian roulette. No one ever knows when they're going to go from one phase of being able to control it to just continue going. And there's 1,800 to 2,000 fatal alcohol syndrome babies born every year in New Zealand. And that when I saw that data the other day, that's astronomical. And that can be stopped. But how to do it? Well, I don't have all the answers. Apparently on the weekend, you go and visit the police there and they'll tell you about, there's youth, they cause a lot of trouble in the town. And the sellers of alcohol, they should be responsible too. They're selling a product, they know what it does. Why don't we come back to them and make them responsible for some of these actions? There should be no advertising for alcohol at all. I remember an advertisement that was on television a few years ago. There was a man, he was up on a ladder, he had a pair of clippers there, and there was this hedge, it went right into the distance, and he was just about finished. And he says, this man needs a DB. Well, that's not what he needed. Because I know what happens to alcohol, and I remember when I was at about mid-primary school, there were 3 of us, my father took us to the races, and we were coming back, he had been drinking, and we had a crash on the way back. We were coming into the corner of the road, the car tipped over, and it's probably fortunate that we weren't all killed or maimed. My father had a scratch on his head here, but apart from that, there was no other damage. And this is my personal experiences. I don't have any of the people before me. You're asking for data from them. Well, I don't have that. I've got personal experience here, and I want to put that out to you and tell you the harm that alcohol is doing in the community. And there might be one person against me for what I'm saying today, but there's probably 10 more who are going to be behind me. And maybe my 10 minutes is coming up, I don't know, but hopefully I've got across to you my thoughts of the harm that alcohol does.
Thank you, Philip. Questions? Lane?
Thank you. Philip, I know where you're coming from, background, I'm saying. Had a father like that. But how do we, I know the problems, but how do you fix it?
How do we fix it?
You've got any ideas?
That is another problem. Well, yeah, you've got to get inside people's brains and show them that there's something better in life for them. I know people, they have problems and all they do, they go to the drink. But that is not the way we're designed. Well, we actually grow within ourselves if we face up to problems.
Yeah, I know that, but do you've got anything to give us to go forward? Is there anything where you think, hey, that is a way forward? We can't give you the answers, but we'd like to know from you how we can help it.
You're asking me for some answers. Yeah, I don't have all the answers here. You've got to show people there's a better way in life, and yeah, I don't know. There's probably better people than me that can, psychologists or whatever, who can study it. Why do people go into it? I've got some data here. People start young. Their parents drink, and then they'll start young there, and that encourages them to drink. If you can stop people drinking until maybe 21, apparently the brain's still developing up until 21, and if they want to make a choice, but we're in a community. Whatever we do, it reflects on other people. We're not an island.
Thank you for that.
Phil?
Thank you. Thanks, Philip, for coming in. You mentioned there should be controls on the outlets selling the alcohol beverages. What kind of controls are you talking about? Are you talking about those ones you mentioned with age, maybe bumping that up, or are you talking about the amount per person? What did you have in mind?
Well, yes, age is probably a good thing. But if somebody turns up at the hotel there, they want 10 crates of beer, well, it's quite obvious there's something going on, and maybe they should respond to that and ask a few questions. And you don't need massive amounts of alcohol to go and have a good time. And if there's one sober person there, he looks around at the others and, you know, he wonders what's going on. They're just, well, you get someone who's inebriated, he's staggering all around the place, and you go to the hospital, there might be someone there, or they've got some disease and they're staggering around, you think, what's wrong with him? And people go and they just make themselves like that, and apparently they're having a good time. But I've heard of people, they say, I heard of one person, he said he gets up in a meeting and gives, you know, a speech. He gets far more better from that than going out and getting drunk. So obviously we've got to show people that there's a better way.
Thanks.
Thanks, Phil. There's 2 points, Philip, that you made was regarding advertising and drinking age. To my knowledge, both those issues are a government policy that obviously we can't influence here. I stand to be corrected there, but I'm pretty sure that it would be correct. So we can only do so much, I would assume. Do we have any further questions? Thanks, Philip, for coming along, and you're more than welcome to stay and have a cup of tea with us shortly. Mr. Holmes and friends.
We're obviously three of us on behalf of the Method Community Board. Another chair. So, you'll know Richie Allen, who's the Deputy Chair, and Robin Jenkinson, who's a Community Board member.
Yep.
My phone is on, that's not at the moment, so if you want to.
We are aware that this is live streamed.
Yes.
So a lot of our comments, if you like, are general, but evidence that we would have, having talked to a number of people, would suggest that what we've got to say, we can't really say it in this forum. So I trust you guys realise that. So I'm sure you've all read the submission on behalf of the Community Board, and I don't really wish to talk too much to that, but really one of the thrusts of our submission is the DLC having quite a bit of discretionary power behind closed doors, for want of a better word, and I see a number of other submitters have submitted along the same sort of line. We consider that it should be a lot more transparent in the way it's conducted, and I guess that's between the DLC and also the person who's operating the way it's being administered to each individual operator. So the other thing that, talking to a few, especially ones with al fresco dining ability, and if you combine that with the licence to occupy that people are asked to sign to use their footpath, the licence can go to 2 o'clock. The licence to occupy the footpath stops at 12, and al fresco can have no smoking. So there's a bit of a mishmash, in our opinion, between the when does dining actually finish, per se, and in the case of the Methven pubs, and there's 2 or 3 of them there with footpath licences, it's a bit of a conflict to be able to get people, in theory, out of the al fresco at 12 o'clock and inside their premises until 2 o'clock if they want to. If they're having a reasonably good night in terms of patronage, they're not all going to fit for a start. And then the administration of that becomes difficult if the DLC doesn't like what it sees. So I'm going to pass it over to Richie Owen, because Richie, he is in a band, as most of you will know, and he sweats the places. So, and he can tell you a bit more about how it gets administered, I guess.
No, I don't think I've got anything more to add there, except for, I guess, yeah, it's affecting those businesses on a number of different levels. They seem to be having to operate under 2 different policies, which is quite confusing. Seems probably, in our opinion, if I speak out of turn, but could be a way to clarify that a little bit more, so they can operate more efficiently, easier under those 2 policies, rather than, you've got 2 different times, doesn't really make sense, so to speak.
Okay.
Yep. We're obviously a tourist town, and at the peak of a tourism season, when you have businesses having to close quite early for whatever reasons, it's not always ideal, given that, that's another factor we'd probably consider.
Yeah. I mean, we discovered that people are, bar owners, are shutting early because it's too confusing and too hard to get everything in line, if you like, for your hours and everything else. So, it's not ideal, as Richie's saying, if you're playing in a band and a pub's shutting at 12 o'clock, and there's people for Africa, because it's just too hard to administer. So I think these policies, because you've got the policy and the bylaw and the al fresco, they review at different times, but in actual fact they're actually quite tied together. So and welcome questions. Robin, do you have anything to say? No, you're right.
So you're saying that, say the Blue Pub is closing earlier than what it should, because the issues with al fresco dining?
Yeah, that's
essentially.
Yeah, essentially that's our understanding. Yeah.
Because obviously they can stay until 2, but they're the
according to
closing
their
earlier.
liquor licence, but
Yeah.
then on their temporary licence to occupy would state that they can't have people on council land past 12 a.m.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's quite confusing for them. So on that outside area, they'd have to move everybody in to enable to operate past that up to the time that they're actually allowed to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your thoughts are that it should be uniform?
Well, our submission said 1 o'clock.
Our submission said 1 o'clock, which is previously where they have operated in the past up until recent years.
Yeah. Okay.
Finish at 12:30, for example. Have everybody basically out of the premises by 12:30.
Yeah.
Currently, it's anywhere between 10:30 to 11:30. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Any questions, councillors? Lynette?
You playing a band up there? Is the band inside or is it playing outside?
No, it's inside. Yeah.
It is inside.
Just to give you an idea of how things have changed probably over the last couple of years from that perspective is normal band times would be from 9 a.m. start to 1 o'clock finish. There's a period probably 8 months ago where we were finishing at 10:30, and everybody was off the premise by 11. So it's a huge difference in trading hours for those people, and in a, it obviously affects the band, but it also affects the community. Like in recent times, that time has changed to I think I'll just speak our term for bands, but it's kick off at 8 a.m. and finish at 11. So it's still 8 p.m. Sorry, yeah, finish at 11 p.m. So yeah.
Just a point of clarification for me, Richard. If the band used to go 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. to 1, and now it goes 8 p.m. to 11 or whatever, is that finishing early so people can get out of the place, out of the al fresco, off the footpath by midnight?
That's our understanding. I mean,
So
that's our understanding. Having talked to those businesses, the issue they have is around that al fresco licensing.
So it takes that time because you've got to say, can you move inside? And then they say, well, finish this. And then
I think that's
inside sort of deal.
Exactly. I think it's quite quite impractical to be able to move everybody that's outside inside.
Yeah.
There's also the one door policy which comes into place at, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 12 a.m.
Yeah, the open door policy.
Yeah, open door policy, 12 p.m. or is it 11 p.m?
I think it's 1 a.m.
1 a.m. But they've actually been administrating that from 11 recently.
Why have they been doing that? Just because they're worried about not getting it right?
Yep. Just to keep it tidy, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
See, some of...
Len.
Oh, sorry. A lot of your other submissions, well, some of them are pro and con and everything else, but a lot of them are talking about instancing myth and saying if the pubs are closing early, the problem goes somewhere else. Yeah. So if it's too hard for the pub, and I hate mentioning names, but it's too hard for the pubs to keep the patronage there because of the laws and the bylaws and the policies, it's plainly not working. Yeah. If you're dumping people around Methven, that will be happening in Ashburton the same, because I spoke to the business on East Street and they've got exactly the same problem about trying to get people indoors at those times, so they just shut it because it's too much aggro to move people around.
Len? Oh, sorry. Len?
Me first.
Oh, sorry.
No, thank you. And Calvin, you just about stole my question. But I was just wondering, had you read some of those submissions that, the ones that had come through from a lot of Methven people and noticed that there were, people leaving the pub early and then going to parties and causing disruption around town, or from what I've heard, people driving to Ashburton to see if there was something going on there. So, has
I read all the submissions, and I see this as a summary, which really I haven't read that, but I read the submissions, and a lot of them are not saying much, but in a funny way they're saying quite a lot, which is the nature of submissions. People just don't want to put too much on paper, I guess. But it's certainly a problem, and as Richie's saying, Methven is no different than Ashburton, but in Methven it's it's a bit of a resort, so you've got a lot of outsider people turning up there. They don't want to see the place shut at hours 10 or 11 o'clock.
Lane?
I still got a bit of trouble with this. The pub still can be open till 2 o'clock, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what is your problem? In midwinter, I don't want to be standing outside. I'd rather be inside and listen to the pub, to the music. So what is the problem? You can't be outside. So like coffee shops here as well. You put your chairs away, you lock them up, and you're sitting inside. I know there's 2 different times, but there's 4 reasons. Why do you want to be sitting outside till 2 o'clock? You can have an answer.
Yeah, you can. What would the reason? What is the reason for the 12 o'clock?
So people stay inside and more controlled than being outside. If I'm walking through town here, 12 o'clock at night, and there's people sitting outside, well, I'm not too scared, but a lot of ladies are.
Okay, yeah.
They don't like to walk past it.
Yeah.
If you've got them inside, it is safer for people who go to home or whatever they want to do. So that's the reason that
Yeah,
the
I guess
footpath,
you could argue
because
that.
in your shop, you can control that. On the footpath, you can say, oh, it's outside the door.
A great point. I guess you could argue the other way too. If the people are having to leave the pub at 10:30 and then walking around the streets and trying to find somewhere else, that's a dangerous environment for the rest of the community as well. So, you know, I'd like to think that the most controlled environment is within the pub. It's definitely better than house parties.
In the pub.
Yeah, it's just.
But in the pub includes the footpath
Okay. Yep.
and the lease, and includes al fresco dining. So in the pub is greater than the building itself.
Okay, thanks, thanks Lane. Rob?
Yeah, just, it's not my view, but it's probably more about what Lane's just probably said. Back in my day, when I was partying up and that sort of carry on around pubs, there was an old saying, no good comes to drinking after 12 o'clock. And if people are left to drink in a public area, all hell generally breaks loose after that time. Back in my day, I'm not sure what happens now. I don't socialise in that time. But,
Yeah.
just
Do you,
to contain
Rob, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wondered what their view was on that saying.
I can speak to that. I think we're all very aware that the pub environment is 100% different to what it was back in the day. There's so many more policies and stringent controls put in place. There's between 2 or 3 bouncers, or, people controlling the environment within a pub these days. They just don't have the ability. You cannot serve anyone that's intoxicated, or they'll lose their licence. There's so many stringent rules in place now that I'd like to think, Rob, that it's a lot safer environment. And from what I personally have seen, it's a lot more controlled environment from when I was probably in that same situation as you. Yeah. So that's my opinion, and I think there's definitely stricter rules around drinking and.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Richie, what your thoughts are with people out in a public area though drinking it after 12 o'clock.
Oh yeah, that's
not controlled.
Yeah. I think we've all been to house parties are pretty loose, you know, for want of a better word. Yeah.
Thanks, Rob. Any further questions? If not, thank you, gentlemen, for coming along. That brings the end to our submissions. So we're slightly at a time, but we'll now break for morning tea and meet at 10:30. welcome back, councillors, to our deliberations for this hearing today. I welcome Femke and Mark, who will take us through this process. So we need to identify issues, debate issues, and make decisions for the staff to go away and maybe write up a new policy for us. So I'll hand over to Femke and we'll go from there. Seeing all lights on.
Yes, thank you very much. And indeed, this is the start of the deliberations. We will run through all the submissions, and this is your opportunity to discuss and ask any questions to us if there are any. I'll just start with, and it's quite a few, as a reminder, the policy objectives. That's these 5 bullets. It's to ensure the decision-making framework within the DLC and the ARLA is clearly defined for applicants and the community and the decision makers. It's a policy objective to provide a consistent approach to licensing throughout the district, to promote the safe and responsible sale, supply and consumption of alcohol, to promote or to contribute to the minimization of harm caused by excessive or inappropriate consumption of alcohol, and to provide for the community's views on licensing matters to be considered. So these are the objectives of the current policy, just as a reminder before we head into the discussions. So the approach to the deliberations is that we assume that you have read all the full submissions, as they are on the PDF, which is the full submission booklet. For the deliberations, we will run through the summary of feedback. We'll use that document, and we'll use the topics that came up in the feedback provided. And as Councillor Todd said, we will be seeking for council direction on wanting to make any changes or keep as is. Maybe just a bit of context on some updates that happened since the council workshop in early May and the consultation in June. There was in the 5th of May, I think, the Supreme Court decision came out dismissing appeals by supermarket companies on council's proposed local alcohol policy in Auckland. And it is referred to as it should reduce the likelihood of local alcohol policies being tied up in appeals. In June, the research was published by Otago University on alcohol being the most harmful drug in New Zealand. And a very current one is that the sale and supply of alcohol community participation amendment bill is currently out for its 2nd reading, and it was scheduled last week, but it's been a bit delayed. It's still on the roll.
So you just update you on that. So it's currently on the order paper of Parliament, and we do expect that to go through prior to Parliament ending for this term. So I think it's on today's 2nd reading list. So potentially by the end of this week or early next week. Mm-hmm. But it will be passed before the end of the term.
Neil.
Could I just ask a question on the alcohol as most harmful drug in New Zealand? Should it be the most harmful legal drug, or is that statement correct?
This is how it's published as the most harmful drug, and then comparing it with all the other.
With methamphetamine, cocaine,
yes.
etc., yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can you send us that thing? Because we've talked about this before with regards to licensing, and we've had opinions that that's not we've had feedback from some of the team that there's no evidence to support that. So it would be good to see that.
Yes, definitely. Would you like me to bring it on the screen now?
Yeah, thank you.
Wait, sorry, it will be on a different level.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yes, so it makes the reference to illegal and other drugs, yeah.
Do you want to read to it? Sorry.
That's what was cited in the submission, this reference. And that's when it talks about two, sort of, firstly the total population and then the youth. Can we go, yeah, okay.
Carolyn, nobody at home will be able to.
Oh, okay.
Is there any other points you want to make there? All right.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is maybe just a reminder, a quick reminder of the process, if you're happy for me to move on. So we have currently consulted on the policy as it currently stands. If council decides to not make any changes, there's the option to adopt it on the 23rd of August council meeting. When changes are made, another consultation will be required. And the influence of how or if the bill will affect this process, that is something that we cannot confirm at this stage, but we will do so as soon as we have more information on that. There's been already some talk about Medfin submissions. So this is maybe, if there's any questions around that, this is just a brief clarification. So there has been the Facebook post on stating the issue from the Blue Pub and their opening hours. And then this is just to confirm there's the actual trading hours on their current license, which is from 8 to 2, Monday to Sunday, and a one-way door restriction from 1 a.m. and the footpath from 8 to 12. So the process...
Tony,
oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Richard.
Last question. Who decides, you talked about if it's a change to, you have to go back out to consultation, who decides if it's significant enough to have to go and make that, reconsult on it?
So, I mean, we have had some legal advice on that in-house, and essentially if there was sort of a change like the alfresco one, for example, let's say you extended those hours for whatever reason, we would have to go out for consultation on that. I mean, if there was a minor change to wording or something like that, then maybe that would be something we wouldn't need to worry about. But we'd just have to do that assessment depending on what came out.
So moving alfresco dining by an hour, is that a major change or a minor change?
You'd have to go out and consult.
We'd have to go out and consult. Okay.
It's a change of hours, sorry. So,
okay.
The advice that we've had is that yes, we would have to consult if that was the case. But I mean, obviously we're just giving you that information to help you as we move through.
Yep. Okay. Oh, sorry.
We are here too. Thank you, Tony. Just some clarification on page number 8. And it tells us the difference all the times. So Monday, 7 o'clock a.m. till 2 a.m. the following day. Restaurants and cafes are 7 o'clock in the morning till 1 in the morning. Next.
Oh, we will...
Oh, sorry. That's on,
yes.
Page 8. That's what I mentioned. Just clarification. And then the footpath areas, 7 o'clock in the morning till 12 o'clock at night. Is that now as it is?
Yes.
So basically, so they can have the alfresco open till 12 o'clock there anyway.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what is wrong with it?
We'll discuss it. Can you go back to the previous slide, please? So I never saw that Facebook page post. But I see there they say we now have a one-way door system in place from 11 p.m. with last drinks called at 11:30 p.m. So they've obviously put that in place themselves, and there's still the one-way.
Yes, on their license it states a one-way door restriction from 1 a.m.
Yep. Okay.
So it's their choice to do that at 11.
Right. Thank you. And just another question: if we decided to change the policy from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., which we've heard a couple of submitters asking us, would that require consultation?
Yes.
That would do as well. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Vimpia. Yep. Oh, sorry. Can't see the
Just
lights.
clarifying. one of the submitters said that there's only a one-way door system in Ashburton and there's nothing in the rural, which Methven is rural, I understand, but to be corrected if I'm not, right. So the Blue Pub has a one-way door restriction. Why is that when the rest don't, if they don't?
Through you, Tony, that's a condition on their licence. Licences can have conditions imposed on them, and that is a condition.
Yeah, understand that. But it's inconsistent with the policy, would it not be? It's not? Do others have that condition on? Do you know?
Not sure.
Yeah, why them? Yeah, don't know.
Well, that would be a DLC condition, and it's probably a reflection of just how many people you can end up with up there at times in ski season.
Just to clarify maybe for that, so for the one-way door restriction, Ashburton urban area is mandatory from 1 a.m. and all other areas of the district are at the discretion of the DLC. So I'm assuming that was a decision that the DLC have made for the Blue Pub.
Lane?
So, just to clarify, the Blue Pub can be open from 8 till 2, restriction from 1 a.m., and footpaths cleared at 12 o'clock. So exactly like everyone else. Okay.
So my questions on the DLC, what input do they have on this process we're doing?
Rick emailed them, or I emailed them, I can't remember which one of us did it, at the start of the process, asking if they had any feedback. There was just general feedback that they thought it was working well in terms of feedback that they'd had and what they'd seen, and they didn't have any feedback except for one member just raised the issue about single sales, being able to just buy one can of something at an off licence. That's sort of a hot topic in Christchurch. I'm not entirely sure of the relevance to it, but that was the only feedback that we got.
Yeah, they obviously must not agree with this entirely because they're putting conditions in which is separate.
I don't think you can, with all due respect, that you could read that into it, because the idea of having discretionary conditions is just so that you can cut the cloth to suit in different circumstances, and they've obviously felt that it was appropriate to do it with the Blue Pub, but not to have a blanket one-way door in all the other licensed premises outside of the Ashburton area.
And just on the single sale, a bottle or a can or whatever one, can you do that now in an off licence or not?
I think you can, but why I don't really understand why it's too much of an issue is you can also buy one bottle of tequila. Femke, do you want
No,
to...
I remember the submission speaking specifically about a very high percentage beers, like that was...
That's right, it was too.
Yes.
I thought if you bought one would be more advantageous, as one of the submitters said, instead of buying a six-pack, you buy one and that's all you have because it's all you've got. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify for Lane just on how the Blue Pub situation works. So there's a dining area out the front of the Blue Pub which is roped, and quite often on a Saturday night they put quite high fences up to not let anyone sort of move out of that area. The problem would be is that at 12 a.m. when they're supposed to get everyone inside, there's usually too many people out there that don't come inside. So they're sitting on those tables. If it's sort of a bit of a balmy night, especially in summer, that's where people will sit out. So, and then there's a sort of a footpath running through there, and then you've got the verandas for the Blue Pub, which people still sit out on. So I think it's just that trying to stop people from going off the veranda with a beer onto those tables, which are sort of the alfresco area. So it is a tricky one. It probably doesn't help that the pub's right on a sort of a footpath area of council, but I'm guessing that's the only, well, I mean, we've heard about Kelly's, but there's quite a bit of mention about the brown pub here. I can't imagine that would be a problem as much as a problem as the blue pub for the alfresco dining.
I don't know.
Don't know.
Richard?
I read the policy itself, and it says, if you look at 2.2, it gives the DLC quite a lot of discretion. You know, it can do things. It says that further discretionary conditions may be imposed by the DLC as long as they have consistency with the Act and the objectives of this policy. So it probably answers Mayor Brown's question in that it does give them quite a lot of discretion to do what they like. And from that discretion, I'm just interested with the process. When the DLC contemplates a licence, is the applicant present the whole time? And is it quite an open process where, you know, it's a bit like this process here. It's very open to the public, open. Everybody can see the process running through, and there's no hidden agendas or anything. It's very open and open. Is that same process as open as that?
If somebody applies for a licence, an on licence or an off licence, or indeed any sort of licence, if there's no opposition to it, there is no hearing. So the licensing inspector writes a report. He or she has input from the other tri-agency partners, health and the police. And if nobody's opposed to it, that report goes to the district licensing committee, and the commissioner will just decide it on the papers. There's no need for a hearing. If there's any opposition to an application, then there's a public hearing, but not before. So is it transparent? When things are being decided without the need for a hearing, it's not public. There's just a decision, and that's what it says in the Act. So I did note James Mackenzie's complaint about that, but if he wants an opportunity, or an applicant wants an opportunity to sit down with the DLC, the only option under the Act is that there be a hearing, a public hearing. There isn't a halfway house. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I can understand that process, and that is, because once you put your application in, it's a bit like a sinking lid from your application. The only way is they'll go down rather than, so doesn't that lead to applicants trying for more, so that then when it comes through they can actually sink back to where they want to be? Because that's the only problem I see with that process. So you'd almost want to go to a hearing in a way, so that then you can expel your reasoning for thing to give, you know, more strength to your argument. Because if you don't go through a hearing, you're at the risk of some of the discretionary conditions being put in just as part of the process.
I'm aware of one case which wasn't in our district where that was a problem, but I'm not aware of any issues here that have been a problem. Applicants can appeal to ALA, the Alcohol Regulatory Licensing Authority, if they don't like a decision, so they do have that appeal right. Most applicants would not want to go to a hearing unless they had to, as a general rule of thumb.
Rob, sorry.
Phil.
Phil.
Thank you, Tony.
That's all right. Phil?
I get the feeling that the Blue Pub are almost sort of throwing their hands in the air and saying, it's all getting a bit hard, we'll just shut the bloody thing at 12 o'clock, which, if that's true, and maybe I'm just barking up the wrong tree, that would be a bit of a shame. We've sort of talked about Methven being a bit of a jewel in our crown, and it's a bit different, and then again, on top of Methven being a bit different and a bit touristy, the pub itself is a bit different. We've got nothing else like it as far as the outside bit goes, and I agree with the Methven Community Board's submission where they say that 1 a.m. would be better. I can see it being a lot easier for those owners to get people inside 1 hour from closing than 2 hours from closing. It doesn't seem a whole lot, that 1 hour, but just, you know, if you're having a nice time outside, and it's up to them to look after their patrons and make sure they're not drunk and all that sort of stuff. and that's all good. But if you're saying, right, you have to be inside now, and they're thinking, well, hang on, we've got 2 more hours of entertaining to do. Why the hell are we going inside now? Sort of thing. Rather than an hour, it's sort of almost saying, right, we're winding down to closing. So, yeah, that's just my concern with it. So, am I barking up the wrong tree? I guess.
Yes, we will run through. Oh, sorry.
Well, we've got a couple of pubs here in town as well. They seem to be able to handle it, getting the people out of the outside and coming in. There's one here in the corner here, and there's one Kelly's and the other one. So if we do it for all. Another question: if we think it's getting too hard and we don't want to have this policy, what happens then?
If you don't want a local alcohol policy, do you mean? Well, as a council, you could vote to, I don't know what the right word is, not get rid of. Revoke.
Yeah.
The policy. You don't have to have one, they're not mandatory. Just on the Blue Pub, before you move on to other things, that is going to be subject to a hearing soon. There's a new owner, and they're operating under what's known as a temporary authority at the moment, but they have to apply for a new on-licence because they're a new owner. That has been opposed by Health, and so there's going to be a hearing. So we haven't set a date yet, but that will be coming up fairly soon.
Thank you. I think like this hearing today, it's another 6 years before we do it again. So we need to be fairly open-minded. I presume there could be developments or new premises in Ashburton or Rakaia, like while we focus on Methven, there could be other. We need to have that opportunity that allows developers in Ashburton to go with new premises as well. So we need to be aware of that. Okay, thank you.
All right, so we will. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, Rob.
Yeah, I was just thinking we're not really comparing apples with Ashburton and Methven. Methven's a tourist in its proximity, and Ashburton really isn't. And we have a far more availability of pubs, nightclubs, etc. in Ashburton. So the public can spread around that many pubs. I think what the trouble is with Methven, because of the age of the pub, etc., they are very space restricted, and possibly that needs to be taken into account going forward for them.
Thanks, Rob.
Just think about the applications. Do you get any applications that don't get objections to? Because Health would object to them all, I would imagine.
Oh no, there's a lot go through unopposed, far more unopposed than there are opposed. With this community participation bill, though, there's going to be a whole lot more hearings, because the net result of that is that anybody will be able to object. So we'll go back to the days that we had originally, where you will get a group in Auckland that routinely objects to every licence application, no matter where it is, and then we have to have a hearing, and that's also at our cost.
Yeah, I also think, Tony, we have to review this within 6 years, but we can do it more often.
Okay.
If it's not working,
yeah,
we have the ability to do that.
Yeah. Okay, good. Oh, sorry, Carolyn.
I'm just saying we've got 42 submitters, so we probably should, cut the debate and get through the submissions, do you think?
I think is got that under control.
Try.
Yeah, she will come to that. Lynette.
I was just wondering, when we do go through this, can we keep Methven out of it? Because I'd actually like to see Methven treated quite differently, as a tourist town, and have a whole separate piece for them to encourage that, where we sort of don't have a problem with the rest of the district. I think Methven is a special case, and perhaps we need to.
At this stage, sorry, just to refer to that, we have a separate, as you'll see on the screen now, these are all the topics that have been submitted on. And as the issue in methane is about trading hours, we have it combined with the trading hours, but as a separate subject to discuss. So we will get to that.
Okay. Femke, away you go.
Yes. All right. So there have, because the questions in the local alcohol policy consultation document were quite open. There has been feedback submitted on the whole variety of topics, as you see on the screen, and we will run through them following the submissions as they are in the summary of feedback document, and as. Just the only time is because there's been comments on Medfin at different stages in the consultation. That's the one time when we have to just go back to all those comments to combine them. So we will clearly indicate the page numbers of the submissions we're discussing the whole time, but that's just a heads up that that's the one time we need to go back in the document. So the first question that was asked in the consultation was if the submitters feel the provisions in the current policy are working well. And this is also, as you will have seen in the summary of feedback, because of the data of submissions referring to a 1 a.m. closing time in Medfin, we have presented two graphs so that you can see the totals and the percentages without those specific Medfin comments and the ones where they are included. If we take those comments out, you could say that about 2/3 of the submitters feel that the current provisions are working well. Feedback that is provided is coming from people who are in support of the current policy and people who are not in support or say that we could do, or council could do more. So people are saying it is, and this is all on page 5 to 7. They're supporting it. They say it's a fair middle ground. They are happy specifically with the one-way door policy or the restriction on trading hours. And then on the other side, you have submitters referring to further measures that could be taken, other national and international evidence, and improvements that could be made on to further reduce alcohol-related harm. So this would be, if there's any comments on the pages from 5 to 7, this is the time to discuss.
Mm-hmm. Any comments, councillors? No, all good. Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. Okay. Russell.
Thank you. So do we have any rules around the density of off-licence and the location they can be?
Not about density, and location is just governed by the district plan, so zoning.
So zoning, yeah. So, yeah, if someone wanted to open one next door to a school, a new one.
If it was in a business zone, they could.
Could,
yep.
Yeah.
Mary Bruce asked, too many outlets. Can we control that? Can we say so many in this district?
You could look at introducing a cap into your LAP.
Okay. Thank you.
Could that, through the chair, could that cap mean bottle store outlets? Off licenses, yeah.
Yes.
So if another supermarket came to town, say Pack and Save, and applied for a licence and we had a cap and we're at the maximum, would they be able to sell beer and wine?
I guess it would depend on the
That would
cap.
be interesting, wouldn't it?
It would depend on the cap and how many premises we had at that point.
Mm. Food for thought. Femke.
I'm happy to move to the next question that we asked in the consultation was if submitters would want to see any changes to the current policy. And here again, referring to the graph, excluding the method-specific comments, that is about 50-50 outcome. Then, so here is the part when we're moving to the next topic, and just because in the submission document it's all about specifically on Medfin, so we're moving to page 14 and 15, where there were some general comments if people would like to see changes to the policy and why. So there's a reference to finding the right balance. There's a reference to supermarkets not being able to sell alcohol, or they should not be able to sell alcohol, the booze culture, and advertising. And there's so this is all on page 14 and the top of page 15. If there's anything to further discuss.
Any comments from councillors?
Got one. So if we wanted to change the timing from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., is this in the general comments or does it come up later?
No, it's later.
Later.
Okay. Richard?
Probably the alcohol density. I think we only have so many people in Ashburton, and to say that we're going to get overrun by alcohol shops, the market will sort that out. As in many other towns, we've seen alcohol shops, thirsty liquors open and shut in several towns, and that's just the market working. So I'm probably a market person rather than if someone's cheaper at another place, people will drive there, and the one who's not, then will shut and move on. So I think it's probably yes, it's great to limit, but do you just protect a business that's probably not as good as the new one who perhaps follows the rules better and has more, hopefully has better constraints on it. If a new business comes in, the DLP will actually give them the licence. That's right, won't it? If a new business comes in, they would get a licence. Therefore, you would hope that that's a modern licence with all the belts and braces to help control things. So we'd actually want that to happen away rather than old licences which could have other anomalies in them which are past times.
There's no further on the submissions on this page, then I'll move to the next, which is the feedback on the cap. So there's been submissions referring to a cap, saying they don't want any more outlets, referring to the recommendation to introduce a cap, referring to other TAs having a cap, which the Act provides for. So this is all on page 15 to 17 in the summary of feedback. There's all the submissions referring to a cap.
I tend to agree with Richard, and the market will determine how many bottle stores will viably exist. I don't think there needs to be a cap.
So you wanting a decision on that now as we go through?
Yes, a discussion and
a decision.
And decision, yes,
Okay.
please.
So we're talking with regards to a cap, we're talking supermarkets, we're talking off licences, and are we including hospitality in that, or is hospitality separate to that?
I think there's option. You can choose as a council what you want in your cap.
Yeah. When we had the submission just recently that we heard, they said that we were proportionately much higher than Christchurch for, I got the feeling, for alcohol outlets. I didn't sort of get what there was. It would be good to have more recent information on that, because we don't want to be known as the booze capital of the country either, do we? I wouldn't have thought. And if we have heard that more outlets provide more harm, perhaps considering status quo on outlets or whatever might be giving less harm. Can one assume that? Yeah. That seems a lot to me, but I don't know. Just asking the question, really, of the team. I feel we don't really have enough information to do that. Where we have, to make a decision on that, what we've got how many we've got, which seems a lot, but I don't know if it's a lot or not compared to other places. But I do recall a couple of years ago there was that off-licence opened in Methven, and nobody wanted it. The community didn't want it, a whole lot of other people didn't want it, and everybody went to a hearing, and the licence was granted. And I think on one side, reading in the newspaper, I wasn't there, there's a lot of people against it, and only 2 people for it. And it went ahead. So perhaps this is an opportunity to consider whether we need, how many off-licence or alcohol outlets we need. I don't know. I'm excluding hospitality because I think the Mayor's position, that's more of I'm excluding that, but I'm including off-licences and alcohol outlets.
I like over the years we've moved on from when when the Ashburton Licensing Trust was controlling liquor bottle stores in Ashburton. I think we had 7 or 8, but we also got to be mindful that the people of the Trust District voted for change, which has allowed more entrance in the market, I suppose. So there was a choice that our constituents made at the time. Liz?
Thank you. I just see on the summary here, it shows that we've got 57 on licences, 27 off licences and 26 club licences. So club licences actually make up quite a number of the licences really. I don't think we need a cap because I think Richard and the Mayor are correct in that the market will decide. Carolyn's example of the bottle store in Methven, there were a lot of people who were against it, but that bottle store is very, very busy. So I think in the end, possibly there was a need for it. Yeah, I just don't think we need a cap.
Neil? Oh, sorry. Rob?
Yeah, I sort of go the other way on that. I do understand that market dictates any business, but I think it was Rebecca Williams has stated that, and I believe she's right, that we are at a saturation point in Ashburton. You can buy liquor like it is very available. And I think we do need a cap.
Neil?
Just a question really, is the location of the liquor outlets is probably more pertinent than the number. Do we have rules now that you can't be so many metres of a school or a church or a whatever?
No.
So you could now have a bottle store right next to a school?
As long as it's in a business zone, yes, it can be.
Yep, and is that right? Are we addressing that with this policy?
That's the sensitive sites, that's further down.
So
Yes.
we'll come to it.
We'll come to that.
Great.
And as maybe just to, as we presented in the workshop, there's different caps can be modified to refer to a specific period of time, to a specific region within the district. So there's not one type of cap. You can modify it to your needs as a council.
I just want to draw everybody's attention to the cap, which Councillor McMillan alluded to. If I use some of the small communities of the town, they could have 5 or 6 licences, and if you extrapolate that to per head, they look like a pack of soaks. But really, if you take out some sports clubs, and then perhaps a small restaurant, a small cafe, a pub, all of those don't actually operate in the same sphere or at the same time, but they all have a licence. So the same one person could go to all of those things just socially, and so that would blow the cap in the amount of licences out compared to in, say, a major city, where you're talking about places that can hold thousands of people or whatever. It's quite a different quantum sort of thing. So every new restaurant that opens, it might only operate 2 days a week, would have a licence. It would be wrong to say that they can't have a licence just because we have too many licences.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think we should let the market dictate, who are we to tell what business can come or not, and people will travel miles to get their alcohol wherever their favourite shop. I think location is the problem, if we can do that a bit better, keeping them away from the schools and things, I think that's probably a better option for us. I don't think it's the off licences people worry about.
Yeah. Lane.
Thank you. I find it a bit scary putting a cap on it, because where do you start and where do you stop? Petrol stations, dairy farms, landscapers, what are we going to do? I find it scary. If you get too many of one, it will fix itself quite often.
Thanks, Lane. Right, Phil, yeah.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I agree with let the market decide, and interesting location one, isn't it? Like when we're saying close to schools, there's an obesity pandemic in most of the world. Do we move the dairies further away from the schools as well?
So just with the cap, so that some clarity for Femke and Mark, do you want to just do a show of hands perhaps for, it seems like most people don't want a cap, so maybe word it that way.
Okay. Carol?
If we do a show of hands, are we talking about a cap on hospo or a cap on everything combined? Because my feedback is perhaps on the outlets,
On the off
not the on the off licenses, not the restaurants, because I think the restaurants have legislation in place to monitor alcohol consumption or the rest of it.
Do it in two parts.
Yeah, do it in two parts. Russell?
And to clarify, do off licenses include four squares and supermarkets? And
Correct, they do. Yep. Hence my point before, if we...
One more point, please, with your indulgence, Mr. Chair. Also, the cap, I don't think there's, I don't know, that there's a feeling to have a cap, but there's a feeling to have a location sort of restriction.
Which is different.
Which is different, so we've got to be careful what we need to know what we're putting our hands up.
Yeah, okay. So we'll vote first on the off licence. Do we...
I should debate it a bit first.
Oh, sorry, okay, okay.
Yeah, the off licence, if you had a winery start up and they wanted to sell a couple of bottles of wine after they'd visited the winery and you've got a cap, sorry, not happening.
That's right.
There's there'll be lots of different scenarios in there which will be captured, which we wouldn't intend on capturing.
Yeah. And my point about a new supermarket coming to town, the same thing. You know, you could have a supermarket unable to sell beer and wine.
Unless Mark might possibly know the answer to this, could you have a cap on off licences that was standalone as opposed to being a supermarket? Or is an off licence an off licence?
I think it would. You could probably be quite specific around it. I mean, we'd have to go away and do some work on that just to understand what that might look like and understand what your guidance was around that. But you could be quite specific around it, I think.
I have no need or want to protect supermarkets. They're just selling alcohol the same as any other one is. So I think a cap or even a location, anything like that, we need to think of Ashburton, a small town. We have a school right next to one of the major supermarkets. So we're going to stop them selling alcohol, but we'll let them anyway because they're a supermarket, but we won't let someone else. So it becomes the rules just should be clean and open, and we don't limit.
I just asked the question to clarify because we were assuming that an off licence was an off licence, but you probably can have permutations by the sounds of it.
Phil?
I don't think it matters personally whether it's off licence or on licence. I think I agree with Richard and those who have said market will decide, and if somebody wants to open up a specialist restaurant and sell a few beers or whatever, then isn't that a good thing for Ashburton that they have a crack and hopefully are successful and pump lots of money back into our district?
Yeah. So the feeling I get is that we're not in favour of a cap.
So if I can...
Sorry,
just in terms of when we did the workshop, we identified some of the options around how a cap could be established. So just to remind you of that, some of the other examples throughout New Zealand are in Tauranga, there's no new bottle stores to be established in areas of a deprivation index of 7 or more. In Timaru, cap and defined geographic area. In Horowhenua, there's a temporary cap for a period of 2 years. There's also the option where the provision can or cannot apply to a supermarket or grocery store premise. And in Napier, there's an option where there's no further off licences issued for any premises in 3 particular areas of Napier. So those are sort of some options around how that could be applied or is applied elsewhere.
Yep, okay. Lane?
Keep it simple, no caps.
Okay, I'll have a show of hands. I think I know which way it goes. If those in favour of no cap, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 against. That, sorry.
No, you're right. I just want to ask a question.
Yep.
You're right. Yeah,
So obviously we're in favour of no caps.
what about location of caps? You know, we have them, I think, through the chair, Jay mentioned they can go anywhere that's a business in the business section. So they can be beside a school or beside somewhere.
You might be talking about sensitive locations
Yes,
as opposed to a cap, so that's the next topic, I think,
Right,
or it's coming up.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, we'll move to the next. The next topic is actually the one-way door policy, which is referred to on page 17 by submitters. And I think the comments here are referring to the differentiation within the policy on urban areas versus other parts in the district, and there is a submission supporting it. So that's all on page 17. The current one-way door policy is it's mandatory from 1 a.m. In the Ashburton urban area, and in all other areas of the district, it's at the discretion of the DLC.
Okay. Carolyn.
I have no particular feeling on a one-way door policy. I understand it stops people roaming around the town, and that's fine. But I think we had a submitter earlier. I think we should be consistent throughout the district. That's my opinion. Yeah.
Thank you. Russell.
Thank you. I have a slightly different view, because if you're in Mount Somers, you're not going to walk out of that pub and walk to the next one, because it's just not physically possible. So I think there is differences in our district. If there was a problem that showed up, the DLC then has the discretion to actually impose some rules on the licence anyway. So and they're not flagging any problems. It's not broken.
Any other comments?
Yeah.
Sorry.
We do have to realise the DLC has the option to put one anywhere it likes. So that sometimes us saying that is all great, but we're actually still, the DLC, we're giving them ultimate right to make that decision. So I wonder, we're putting a policy in place, but really it's pretty weak because the DLC can do what it likes. So we're giving them all the power in that situation. That would just, that's something I think we need to understand.
Elaine, sorry.
I was just going to say on that, the District Licensing Committee is a committee of the council, and you have the final say in who you appoint and what have you, and they tend to, over time, develop a really good understanding of what works and what doesn't. So in that respect, they probably do have a bit of an edge on the rest of us in that they're seeing life at the coalface.
Lane.
Thank you, Tony. Can you just go back one slide? Because I think the district should be equal for a start, and I support the one-way restriction. But Mount Somers got 2 pubs.
Neil.
Yeah, one submitter did submit that in person, that should be all treated equally, but if the DLC's got the ability to put the one-way door system on as per licence, it's fine. As I asked him, if you're at Mount Somers or Rakaia and there was 10 people or 5 people in there, it's a bit hard to manage, and is it even necessary? So I'm probably suggesting what we've got is fine.
Okay. So you want a decision?
I've got another question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've had a lot of discussion about the Blue Pub having a one-way door policy from 1 a.m. and that's in their discretion. District Licensing has decided on that. Are there any other areas, say the Mayfield pub, or have they got discretionary one-way door licences as well, or is it just the one out of the Ashburton Township?
I think it's the only one, but I'm not 100% sure. Are you, Femke?
No, no, it would be our licensing inspector who could probably answer that best. I thought there were more that had throughout the district, but I can't confirm at this stage. Or Rick?
Through the chair, we'd have to chat back on the numbers. I don't think.
Put your light on.
Through the chair, we'd have to check back on numbers. I don't think it's just the one as in Blue Pub, because these are decisions made discretionary by the DLC, so we'd need to just check on that for you.
So
yeah,
that would be kind of my case. So if there's more than one pub who out of Ashburton Township who have got the one-way policy, then maybe we should make it blanket. But if there is only just the one, then what's the point? I'm just thinking, so Ashburton Township has got a 1 a.m. one-way door, and by the sounds of things, like we're saying, are the smaller pubs, do they actually need one? At the moment, all we know is that there's one pub out of Ashburton District who's got the 1 a.m. door, and that's discretionary. So is there any point in making it a blanket if there's only one other pub that has that discretionary 1 a.m. one-way door? But if there's 5 other pubs, say the Mayfield pub or the one at Hines or Rakaya, then maybe we should look at having a blanket.
Yeah, generally speaking, with regulation, when councils or indeed the government are imposing regulations, you're supposed to have a good reason for doing it. So I think that's why it was only applied to Ashburton rather than right across the whole district, because you couldn't really justify having it for Hines or,
There's no choice. Phil.
Thank you. The main idea behind the one-way door restriction is keep people off the streets wandering to another establishment, causing trouble. That's the general idea behind it. So, yeah, there goes your argument for your Hines and what have you. But to the likes of Methven, at 1 a.m, are any of the other pubs open? Is the Brown or the Green Parrot? I assume maybe that is.
I don't know whether they are or not, but I know in the past there were problems with other pubs up there all moving around later.
To me, if there's more than one option in a location, e.g. Ashburton, Methven, then they should all have the same policy in that location. But if there's only one option in a Hines, for example, then it's kind of pointless, my thoughts.
Well, all the Methven locals have been telling us lately that you can't get a drink of Methven after 10:30 at night.
No, and that's the market. That's the market working because they don't believe there's warranted to stay open. But just having one place in Methven with a one-way door, all it does is penalise that premises, because they'll leave that one establishment which they can't go into, go to the one across the road and straight in. They need to be all on or all off or all on, rather, if you're going to use it. Otherwise, it won't work. Just go to the pub across the road or down the road or wherever.
So we need decisions as to whether they keep the status quo. Elaine.
Like I said before, one-way door policy for all the same rules.
Sorry, through the chair, would you like to come back to this later? I know Rick has asked for more details on this. If we can have that maybe in the meantime, would you like to come back to this at a later?
Okay, do that.
Yes. The next topic is the sensitive sites. That's on page 17, feedback provided on this topic from page 17 to the top of page 18. So this is submissions referring to restricted areas for alcohol selling close to a primary school. There is reference to other labs that include this possibility of having a reference to sensitive sites. Some feedback on how it will reduce the exposure to people. So there's all the submissions for you to go through on page 17 and 18 for discussion.
Russell. Thank you. Why are primary schools seen as sensitive sites when no primary school student is going to be able to walk into that establishment? So is it, I just need an understanding of why it's seen as primary schools. I would have said a bigger threat would have been if it was next door to a high school, but don't know.
I think that has to do with the advertising and just sort of normalizing of alcohol. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Neil?
Just looking at the policy we have now, I don't see sensitive sites in it.
It is correct. It's currently not in our policy.
So we need to make the decision, do we put it in?
There have been submissions in favour and against a reference to sensitive sites, so that will be up to council to decide on.
Thank you. And I agree with Russell, yeah, where they should be, like primary school, but advertising, yeah. Yeah, we should do vape shops here too.
Phil?
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's a whole lot of grey areas around this, and as I mentioned, dairies in the same vicinity advertising specials on chocolate or Coca-Cola, so it's going to ruin their teeth. Where do you start and stop? I think the market will decide if you are dead against that shop being there, and then you don't go and shop there, and you tell all your friends to do the same. So, yep, I'm in favour of keeping it out.
Caroline?
If you had a sensitive site component of the policy, would that impact existing outlets and things?
No, it wouldn't, because they would have existing use rights. But where I get confused, and Mark or Femke may know the answer, is that when they come up for renewal, then the DLC can have regard to what your lap now says.
Okay.
So in an extreme situation, you wouldn't renew an off licence because it's within 100 metres of a primary school.
Yeah.
So what happens then? Are they just kicked for touch out of business? I don't understand that part of.
Because my view is, I think probably none of us want to be advertising alcohol right next to any sort of school. That would seem, as you say, because it normalises alcohol use and it doesn't seem sort of the go.
Well, that's something that's in the amendment bill
And I take Phil, your point about the chips and pies and stuff, that's a good point too, but we're not discussing that, so that might be in the conversation for another day. Yeah, that's right, take your point. I don't know, but then we don't want people that have bought a business and invested, that just seems unreasonable because they were allowed to operate prior to this discussion. But it would seem to me that we shouldn't be allowing alcohol outlets, I'm talking off licences, next to any school, you know, because they're all kids, all under 18, most of them anyway.
Do you know, Mark or Femke, in terms of the amendment bill, that says that when, if I recall correctly, that when a DLC looks at a licence that's up for renewal, they can have regard to that? What that would mean in real terms?
In short, no. We'd have to have a look at that just to see what their circumstance.
Surely it would have to apply to new licences, because if we said, if it comes up for review, you've got New World opposite Borough School here, and you've got a bottle store opposite the Allington School. So, you know, we need to be aware of existing licences at the moment.
That's right. That's right, yeah.
Russell?
And it's just got to be careful of unintended consequences, because Allington, there's 4 licensed premises in Allington, 2 off licence, 1 bar that has seating outside, so that could be seen as not being desirable close to a school as well, and another licensed restaurant. So in that small area, there's 4.
That's right.
If you wipe that, you wipe the Ellington Shopping Centre off the face of the earth pretty much. So you just got to be careful.
Neil?
Just clarify what Carolyn was talking about. You said no advertising of alcohol next to a school. So you're happy for it to be sold next to a school?
I don't feel I'm informed enough to make a decision, to be honest. Beg your pardon. I'll go after it. I'll put my light on and I'll do that.
Lynette?
Yeah, I don't believe we should go into this grey area myself, because I'm just thinking we're going to hinder all those businesses when they come up for sale. The business owners won't be able to sell those businesses and they'll be lumbered with them. So my thoughts are don't go there. We're just going to cause a heap of trouble and,
Caroline?
In response to Neil's question, there is restrictions on, you can put restrictions on advertising alcohol outlets, can't you? I'm talking off licences, I'm not talking MSA or the local restaurants, I'm talking off licence.
There are rules in the district plan regulating advertising, but the DLC can also impose additional discretionary conditions.
I think I saw that on the news recently.
In terms of how.
I mean, even that would be, in taking all the comments about unintended consequences, even that would be an opportunity, benefit perhaps. I don't necessarily want to close places down. I just don't think it's right to have a billboard out the front saying buy 2 bottles of gin for $50 or whatever,
They've certainly pushed back on some proposed signage, the DLC, and haven't allowed the signage to go ahead in the format that was proposed by the applicant because it was seen as being far too intrusive.
Okay. Oh, well, perhaps that's enough then.
I suspect it probably is.
Am I correct in saying that every time a licensed premises gets sold or a new licence is applied for, that's a completely new licence? It's not like you have...
Yes, correct. They get a temporary authority to tide them over, which can be renewed, and that's what the Blue Pub's running on at the moment, so they can keep trading, and then they apply for a new licence.
So there's no user rights, effectively. So any rules we make will affect to new licences, to all licences in the district, which is a good outcome because then we get change quite quickly if it's desired. And also am I correct in saying that the DLC, through our policy, will take into account any changes that government and also probably more, you'd say, case law that comes out of those Act changes. So if advertising came in and went through the process and it was found in many areas of the country, they would take that into account as our policy says as to how advertising or even localities come into it. Am I right in that assumption?
I would think so, yeah. Yep.
Phil?
Thank you. If we do say that we want to put this in, would we then have to come up with some meterage? You have to be 453 metres away from the school. That's another.
Yep. We'd have to do
area.
a whole lot of homework in the background. We'd have to do using GIS stuff, work out possible controls, and then show you on maps what the effect of that would be. And I know because I've done it before. Remember when there was that legal highs debacle, the psychoactive substances?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, crikey. We had to do it for that, and it got horribly complicated to the point where you weren't allowed to completely exclude them, but most things that we tried would have had that same effect, like you couldn't open a shop because you were too close to this or too close to that. And you can't really control things either, in that say you have a preschool comes along and that's one of your sensitive sites and it opens up 3 doors down. Mm-hmm. So suddenly that's created a,
Yeah, it's just too many grey areas for me.
Yeah. Lane?
Keep it out. It's too hard. I think if something happens, we can do it one by one.
Yeah.
With other rules.
Thanks, Rick. Oh, sorry, Rick's just clarified the brown pub also has the discretionary one-way door, so it's the blue and the brown.
Okay. Okay.
One more question, if I may, please. With regards to the district licensing, the licensing committee, is the council able to give feedback to the licensing committee, or do they get their feedback through this process, or how do
Well, Rick and I are secretaries, so if there's things you want us to tell them, we will. We've got a new system set up now. I think I told you recently that we've now got 5 new members, which is great. They're all enthusiastic and keen to get going. And what we're doing now is we're going to have a monthly meeting alternating Selwyn 1 month, Ashburton the next. There'd be no reason why you couldn't come along and talk to them at one of those meetings.
So if problems arose,
yep,
we can say to you or Rick through the chair, problems have arisen here. Can you please have a talk about that, or
Sure.
or implement something?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's reassuring. Thank you.
Yeah, just the DLC, Jane, you mentioned they're a subcommittee of council, yet nothing comes through council from them.
No, it's not supposed to. It's not a committee in that sense of the word. It's the Selwyn Ashburton or Ashburton Selwyn District Licensing Committee, but they're completely independent in terms of the decisions they make. But that's not to say they're not happy to talk to people and listen.
Councillor, sensitive sites. We need to decide on that. Are we happy to keep the status quo and have no sensitive sites? Maybe if you raise your hands. Feel unanimous? All in favour? Cool.
Thank you. So I go back to the one-way door policy now that we have the information for your guidance on this one.
Russell?
I would now include MEF in the one-way door policy, as both pubs have it put on them by the DLC anyway, so does it make it more sensible that we include them?
Could I make one suggestion that you might like to wait till the end to make that decision? Because if that did end up being the only change you wanted to the lap, it means you're going out and doing public notification, going through this whole process again for one change. And if you want to do that, that's your right, but you might, if that is the only change, you might wonder whether it was worth it or not.
Yep. Okay. Okay.
The next topic, sorry, it seems like that's dropping off the screen, is the trading hours for off-license. So this is off-license specific, and there's been feedback provided on page 18. So I'll try to adjust the slide as we go. But the current, just to clarify, the current hours in the policy for off-license are Monday to Sunday from 7 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. And feedback has been provided that referring to a delay to have the opening time at 8 or 9, matching the hours in the Act. So that's what's on page. If you go to page 18, opening hours for off-license, the feedback is discussed there, and the current hours are 7 to 9:30.
Comments, councillors?
I've got one. I'm just wondering what the point is in having it at 7 a.m. if we have a lot of off licences that aren't open till 8 a.m. So I'm guessing the supermarkets don't open at 7 a.m. They're open at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And was the Mayor's comment before correct in that we were actually providing for the people who were doing shift work?
The Mayor may be right. I don't remember about the shift work, but what I do remember was that this was one where there were appeals against the hours that we put in the original lap, and we did avoid going to court over that by agreeing to these hours, which, as you say, is sort of a bit academic because it was the supermarkets leading the charge. They don't even open at 7 o'clock, they don't open till 8. But I do distinctly remember what their argument was. They said they do a fair bit of trade of people passing through on their way to the southern lakes, and that they're stocking up for their holidays at the supermarket, buying all the food and everything to take down to Wanaka and what have you, and they buy the booze at the same time. And they didn't want to go back either to those old days that you will probably recall, where you go to the supermarket to do your shopping and all the booze was covered up with black cloths because it wasn't the right time of the day to be buying the alcohol.
Oh, sorry, Lenny.
I was just thinking that might change my mind thinking of that, because the shops, if we changed it to an hour later and they opened, they would have to go back to covering or shutting that area off in the shops.
Yes, the supermarkets I don't think open till 8, do they? 8 a.m.
Right, and just going, if we did make it 8 o'clock in the morning, is that just a minor change? Would that make us go back to consultation?
Oh, sorry, Philippa just said it was at 7:30 at Christmas.
All right.
Okay. So at Christmas they open at 7:30. Yeah.
So they would have to put.
Yeah.
Okay. So
and you'd
okay.
have to go back to get your booze later.
Right. Okay. We'll leave it the same.
Yep. I would follow the law of the land. If the Act says 7 a.m, why would we be changing it, going through the grief of trying to change it when the Act says that? Is that correct? The Act says 7 o'clock? No, the Act.
No, it must say 7.
The Act of the law of the land, if you know what I mean. And it says 7. Why would we change from that? There's no real benefit, I'm afraid, to go to 8.
Neil.
Would the same apply at the other end of the day, supermarket? Is it 9 o'clock the bottle store's supposed to close? What time is it?
It's 9:30.
9:30? The supermarkets, what time do they close?
They
11,
shut
12?
at 9.
9?
Yeah, but
I'm sure 24-hour supermarkets are probably coming.
Yeah.
Kmart is open till
That's right,
12,
Kmart's
isn't it?
Till
12.
midnight. They're open to midnight.
Warehouse, what time is it shut?
Midnight.
They don't, midnight. They don't sell booze, I don't think, do they?
No.
Not yet. Not yet. So, yeah. Leave as is. Yeah.
So consensus is the off-license trading hours will remain the same? Hands? Yes. Fine.
All right, the next topics, submissions on page 18 and 19 refer to the opening hours of on-license. And here we start with the more general comments, and then later on there is specific Medfin feedback. So at this stage will be the feedback provided on page 18 and 19, which was more general comments on the on-license trading hours. There's asking for fewer controls, later opening hours, and there is submissions asking for further reducing the trading hours. So that's all on page 18 and 19. That's right.
Comments?
I just want to make a comment on the opening hours, just for everybody's information. 4 Square in Netherby opens at 6 o'clock in the morning.
So you have to wait till 7.
Can I just comment on? Yeah. This is another one that I recall from when we did the first lap. There were submissions from pubs and the like saying that occasionally they'll open early to do a champagne breakfast for a work do or something. It's rare, but they like to have that up their sleeve to be able to do it, whereas normally they wouldn't even be open at that hour, but this gave them the flexibility to cater for those one-off events.
Yeah.
I think the government changed the law as well for the Rugby World Cup to open early because it was the other side of the world. And
you don't need a special licence.
they changed the law.
Yeah, they've emailed us about it. They just need to let us know what they're doing. And,
here now.
Yes, yeah, and they don't need to go through the special licence process.
Yep. I think I raised it when we were putting this out for consultation. 2 o'clock in the morning for a pub to shut is pretty late, isn't it?
I bet you didn't always think that, Mr.
For a mere moment, I probably didn't. But, I think I've always did.
I think you're talking to the wrong people here, Neil.
1 o'clock would
be any amount, I'd have thought.
I would take the 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock means that they have to stop serving alcohol, but their building can be still open longer. Is that correct?
I think you have to stop serving half an hour before, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that's fine. And the other question I had, the other one, I would class that a good venue, the alfresco dining is part of the whole venue. That's the whole experience, and it builds together, and that builds the ambience of the place. Therefore, I question the 12 o'clock shutting for it, which is 2 hours before the other, which doesn't lead well to the method of, I think it was talked about by someone early on, where if you go to 1 o'clock for that, 1 o'clock means you tell the people this is shutting. If you want to drink, come inside. It's a gradual process of removing the patrons rather than at 11:30. If you want to stay, come inside or go away. So I think it's a bit of an anomaly, because I think 2 o'clock near Mr. Brown is the new 12 o'clock. I have 4 kids at that age, and 2 o'clock is the new 12 o'clock.
Thank you, and I agree with the 2 a.m. as well, and I think we talked before about shift workers wanting to buy their alcohol earlier. You've got hospo workers who may finish their shift at sort of 10 o'clock at night, and they might want to go out and sort of wind down. So I think 2 a.m. is fine. I too question the footpath area with the 12 a.m. I think it's causing us more problems than it should, and I think that should be moved to the 1 a.m.
I support Liz's remarks. I just have some questions. With regards to restaurant or cafe, why do they have to stop earlier than a tavern, and where is the demarcation?
I can read the definition of a tavern, which is a type of premises used or intended to be used in the course of business, principally for providing alcohol and other refreshments to the public. A tavern includes premises that might generally be referred to as pubs, bars, and nightclubs. Why it isn't different for a restaurant or a cafe, that might be something the people involved at the original.
I think that's part of the risk assessment.
Because when you look at
a pub,
yeah, because when you look at restaurants now, like we have a new restaurant in town that does food and drink, and a lot of people go to drink at the restaurant and then they leave to go home. Like they're sort of morphing together, aren't they? There's no pubs that you traditionally think of pubs now have quite fancy food service menus, and you can get dinner, lunch, and breakfast or whatever you want. What used to be a traditional pub.
That's true, but they might also have live bands and much bigger volumes of people.
They may do. We've got some massive new restaurants now, though, in town. So I think, personally, they should be treated the same, is what I'm saying. But I totally agree with regards to the footpath. Perhaps it's an unintended consequence, and that might need revisiting. And I support Liz with regards to the people that are working at night, like the young people and finishing at 10:30, they want to go out and meet their friends and all the rest of it.
They're just not treated the same way in the Act.
No.
Phil? I wanted to know where Kelly's sits. Are they classed as a tavern or a restaurant cafe? Because they are
the big cafe.
They're Kelly's bar and cafe, and they're kind of $1 each way. So where do they sit?
Be classed as a cafe. Yeah.
Do we know which one they sit in?
No, I don't know.
I mean, under the restaurant definition is that mainly it's principally used for supplying meals to the public for eating on the premises. So I guess that's the main difference. It's around the serving of food.
I think they all look good except for the footpath areas, and I think that should be moved to 1 a.m.
Richard, can I make just a comment on the restaurant one? If the DLC is taking into account that by having the differentiation, if a person applies for a restaurant one, that actually implies a lower level of risk. Whereas if they want to open at night and do all that, they need to go to the higher risk level, which is a tavern, and therefore I'm guessing the DLC would then say, well, you need to do these things because you're going for a higher risk licence. So it's actually quite good. It does give us the discretion is the person when they apply. if they want to stay open till 2, they need to lift the bar higher.
Yeah, good.
Any other comments? So the feeling that I get is that the tavern, oops.
So this was actually the first part. We've already touched now upon the method specific, maybe before we discuss the general unlicensed trading hours. So, and I think it's proper procedure to go back to the pages on 8 to 12 and refer to all the feedback provided by the submitters on the trading hours in specific Metfin, if there's any questions or comments.
So if we extend the alfresco dining to 1, it won't just be in Methven, I assume, that we would do that. So it will have a flow-on effect to other areas.
Correct.
Yep.
Yep. Phil, who's next? Sorry.
Me, sorry. That was kind of my question. So can they have their sort of discretionary for one particular premises? So can the Blue Pub apply for that footpath or the sidewalk access to 1 a.m. as a one-off, or does it have to be a blanket approach? Because they've got the 1 a.m. One-way door policy, so can that be transferred to the footpath policy as well to kind of, I don't know, to just make it easier and sort of.
So I mean, currently these are the stated hours in the policy, so that's what applies. So I'm not sure whether potentially that could be added as a discretionary condition that the DRC could consider, and that the hours could be changed. I'm not sure if that's an option.
Phil?
I got distracted by the mayor on the thirsty liquor website. And I thought all this talk about alcohol, he's buying up. Then it went back to the advertising sort of thing. But yeah, I think if we are doing it, if we're going to change it for Methven, then it should be changed for those in town too. And it's all part of the wind down process, in my opinion. But a lot of these Methven comments were just. They had it wrong, didn't they? Their information was wrong, so a lot of it's sort of irrelevant too, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Lane?
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. If you go through it, they don't even know what it's talking about. So maybe it's tell them that you can be there at 2 o'clock. And really, if you want to do it for one, you have to do it for all. But I'm not sure if that is the best option. I think what we've got is still working. As it is.
Russell. Thank you. So if we change this, it's the al fresco dining policy we have to change, not this one. No.
It is the.
I keep getting mixed up.
Okay.
Femke's had to keep reminding me it's actually the lap that says you're not going to stay on any outdoor areas after 12 o'clock. Not the al fresco dining one doesn't refer to ours at all.
Oh. Cool.
This is how it is stated in the lab. So this is.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm definitely keen to change it to 1 a.m. and it's fine if it's a blanket rule across the district. But I mean, even though we got all those submissions from Methven and they may have had their wires crossed, I still think we heard that they're not happy with what's going on, and it's contributing to other factors in that they're leaving the pubs and they're going to private houses and having parties. They're creating noise. There's no one there to say, you know, there's no barman at someone's house saying, sorry, you're cut off because you've had too much. And also that risk, and what I've heard about, of people jumping in their car and driving to Ashburton and then driving home again. So I think this is something we really while the information might not have been correct and the submissions may have got it slightly wrong, I think we still do need to take it into consideration.
Neil?
Yeah, agree with Liz, you move it to 1 AM over the district.
Yep.
Then people will go to houses afterwards, but they'll have to pre-plan it because they won't be able to buy it at a bottle store. So with good planning, they can do it. With not good planning, it won't happen because unless they've stocked up at home. So happy with Liz's suggestion.
Carol?
Happy with Liz's suggestion for the whole district, not just Methven. But also, I'm looking up the New Zealand Police submission. They don't talk about people leaving and going home and drinking. And you would think that they would be called out if there's riotous behaviour in the streets of Methven. But they don't talk about that. In fact, they don't actually talk about it. It just says to minimise alcohol-related harm. It would be good to know like how much alcohol-related harm they see, or did we have any other communication with the police?
I do know that the police have been focusing on Methven, which led to the Blue Pub making the decision to close earlier.
Okay.
So it was part of the alcohol unit for Canterbury policing that they were targeting the area.
Okay.
And this will now go out for full consultation, and the police may well submit.
Be useful.
That's
That's
the
up to them.
democratic process.
Yeah. Thank you.
Femke, can you just put the other one over just before?
The hours or this one? Yes.
Yeah, like this one.
So
you know, in the 40 years I've been here, I've seen people going from Methven to Ashburton and Ashburton to Methven. So that has been going for the last 40 years. A lot of people drinking before they go into the pub. So that can give trouble before you even get to the pub already. So half of those ones happens anyway. I go with the flow, but I think what we've got is fine.
That's fine. So the feeling I get is the trading hours for on licence will remain the same, apart from the alfresco, which will move from 12 till 1 AM.
The footpath.
Footpath, I mean, yeah.
Throughout the district.
Yes. Yeah. Everyone clear on that? All happy?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so the next is the discretionary conditions, feedback provided on page 22 and 23, where there are suggestions made of additional discretionary conditions, referring to a buy now, pay later service, the size of alcohol or the percentage of the drink, external advertising, and then there's feedback on the process of providing the discretionary conditions. So that's all on page 22 to 23.
Comments? Phil?
Yeah, a lot of grey areas with this one in my eyes as well. Are we going to stop people from putting money into slot machines? You know, if we're saying to a business that you can't run a pay later system, then, you know, it's a no from me.
I think the thing is, if a person doesn't have the money, that they're still going to be able to have access to alcohol and hopefully pay for it later. Maybe.
Again, I do give the DLC has discretion if it sees through the national, where things are going nationally, it will I'm sure take those into account, won't it, when it gives out licences. So if there's a nationwide push to have less advertising or this sort of stuff, I'm sure the DLC will take that into account, right? Because that's their job effectively, isn't it?
Well, I guess as long as it's in line with the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act as it stands. So, I mean, that's the sort of primary piece of legislation that they would be referring to. Policy is something that they have to take consideration of, in my understanding. But the default, they go back to the Act.
Any other discussion? So we're happy to keep the status quo? All happy? Okay, thank you.
Right. The next one is page 24 to 26, which had a very wide variety of subjects. So that's more for you to discuss. Any other comments section? The feedback.
Just interesting that someone's saying the decisions aren't objective enough, they're subjective, and somebody else is saying they're not rigorous enough. So I suppose if you're somewhere in the middle, you might be about right.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what is their rules with reserve boards around alcohol on our grounds with rugby? Because I know I questioned this a while back. You go and watch the kids rugby, and then the guys all roll up there in their trucks and they pull out a beer and drinking, and I don't like the practice myself, seeing it, because it's encouraging, you know, having a good time and they're all drinking. I'd like to see something around that. If you know, they could have it on the grounds after a certain hour or something.
That's outside of the lab.
That's outside the lab.
I think
Okay.
Femca or Mark might want to comment.
So we can't influence that one at all?
Well, a lot of these clubs have got a club licence, and they'll have a condition saying you're not allowed to take alcohol outside of the club room. But people bring up in their truck with a can of beer. I don't know what you do about that unless we've got an open spaces bylaw saying no booze, which I think we have. Who's going to enforce it, I don't know.
Yeah, because I had a few parents, you know, ask this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Phil?
The first one, that's totally relevant, isn't it? Energy drinks?
Energy drinks. Yep.
No.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any law is only as good as its enforcement, so, but I'm not in favour of laws that go too far, and so we won't do anything about that. So if a law's a law, it has to be enforced and, you know, put up. So I think we're hitting a good medium here by not going, if we go too far and say, well, we'll let bits slip through, that's bad law. So if the time's the time and the place is the place, sports fields and all that, that's all covered off in our policy, so it just has to be enforced.
My comment was just, I don't think any of us disagree that alcohol causes harm, but I think we just have to have that balance where we want to be a vibrant district, we want to have you know, good restaurants and bars and provide that for people, but also make sure that our children are safe and everything as well. So I think it's just creating that balance.
Yeah, it's a fine balance.
Yeah, absolutely agree. But what is interesting is the Te Whatu Ora Vince Barry on page 24 looked at, and we go down to page 4th point from the bottom on page 25, you look at the rate of hospitalisations in the Ashburton district. Now, this is, you know, admittedly, as we discussed earlier, 16 to 18, but this is not comparing, it's got Christchurch in there, but it's comparing with Timaru and Selwyn, much higher than those other regions. And I just wonder, and it's wholly attributable to alcohol. Why? I mean, I'd like to know why that is. Because we seem to be a pretty normal town, like all the other towns. I just don't understand why and this is just a note of perhaps balance or caution, that we do seem to have a higher problem with alcohol than other districts. It'd be interesting to know what it is, if it's still the same, but I don't see what's happened to make it change. Just a comment, I think we should just remember that.
That information, though, was before we actually even had a LAP policy. We brought our LAP policy in
6 years ago.
17, so some of that information's outside the area when we had
I can't comment on the stats. I do know when we did the first lap, there was no information available that was helpful at all. It was all anecdotal. Hospitals couldn't tell you how many incidents were related to alcohol. In fact, nor could police, although it was a factor in a whole lot of things, but you couldn't narrow that down into, was it the only cause? So there wasn't really much meaningful data there, and I think probably most people would accept that alcohol causes harm. Just trying to find the right stats to say you should be doing this in this area and not in that is not really there.
Carol.
Yeah, it is very difficult to find any statistics, as I alluded to earlier, but that is really, we definitely need to do some investigation on that. Whether it's our job or the hospital's job or public health, I don't know, but that's a lot compared to everybody else.
I suppose it comes back also, where's the responsibility lie? Because it's a 15-year-old, in theory, you've got to be 18 to get it, so it's being supplied.
But that doesn't matter, does it? Yeah. It's still happening.
Yeah. Anything further?
Oh, no.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any changes on those pages? All happy? Thank you.
Then the last topic is the licensing on page 27 and 28. Reference is made to the process, and yeah, as discussed.
Phil.
Just a comment, really. I just hope as a whole, but DLC included, that we are looking positively at things and how can we make this happen rather than let's throw some hurdles in the way. And I'm sure we are.
Comment.
I think that the DLC certainly is following the law, and I think they're doing a good job overall. The role of the licensing inspector is sometimes a difficult one. They're part of a three-way grouping. The tri-agency also involves health and the police. You probably know what health think. They were here today. You probably know from a police point of view, whilst they're practical about it, the less alcohol there is out there, probably the less work there is for the police to do. And so that can become a bit of a fine line in terms of overall approach.
Neil.
Just think about James McKenzie's submission. He talked about a system threshold. Perhaps councillors could, or someone know a bit more about what he was talking about.
I think I did scribble something down. I think I sort of understood the principle of what he was saying. He was saying that it's subjective and it's opinion based, and that often it's made without the risk having been properly understood, and that there was no opportunity to explain their case to the DLC. And as I explained before, if it's not a hearing no, then that doesn't exist. But to try and do it on a sort of a point system in terms of what he was saying, under the Act, I just don't see how you could do that. I mean, we use point system based systems for some things. For example, if we're deciding what sort of enforcement action to take under the RMA or the Building Act or whatever, we use a matrix where we answer every question and give it a score, and at the end that tells us whether we're on the right track, picking prosecution as the right approach. And that's to try and make sure you are being objective and not thinking to yourself, God, this person is really asking for trouble here, they need the book thrown at them, so that you actually stay on point and you're objective. But when you're dealing with an application for a liquor licence, you really only can rely on what it says in the Act you're supposed to be doing. I don't see how you could turn that into a points-based system. And with an ice bar, I think concerns raised at the time, they did get consent for it in the end, didn't they? But I think concerns raised at the time about the the potential for it to go horribly wrong with people sculling schnapps or something and then zooming off and breaking their neck. They were perfectly valid questions to be asking. The Opuki hot pools, there was evidence presented by health on that application showing that alcohol goes to your head far more quickly when you're sitting in hot water than when you're sitting on dry land. And there was quite a bit of evidence around that, which was what led to a cautious approach towards that licence. So I didn't think that was entirely fair.
Yes. Oh. That's.
Just going back to that, so the Corona bar, I think only sells Coronas.
Do they?
I think, I actually have never been there, and they do provide food as well because that's part of their licence. At the hot pools, so the adult side of the hot pools, you're limited to 2 drinks in the hot pools because it definitely does go to your head. Speaking from, I have tried it, yes, but I only had 1 drink, and that was enough. So you're absolutely right. But they have put that in place where you are allowed 2 drinks at the bar, 2 small glasses.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? All happy with what's there? Okay.
Okay. Then I think there's there's a question, these are obviously the written submissions, then there's the question to council if there's anything from what we heard this morning that you would want us to add to the topics or to discuss and consider.
Cool.
The last page, page 28, Clubs New Zealand recommend that this is added to the policy. Controls of charter clubs. Is that palatable to the team? Controls that will be the same as controls with club licences and on-off licences. They just want to be stipulated that they're in part of it.
So it's a wording change.
That's what they're recommending. Is there a concern around that? I can't see that there would be, but it doesn't seem. I don't know. They must feel that it is needed. What do you think, Jane?
To be honest, I don't know.
No.
I would have thought it was obvious that saying clubs, it does include it.
I would have thought so, but clearly they don't believe it does. Or
yeah.
I think they have to follow the same club license regulations. They don't need to pay for a license renewal. There's only 5 chartered clubs left in New Zealand, and one of them is the MSA in Ashburton. It's the Queen Victoria.
But they do have to follow the same rules, and they know
so
that, so
would it harm? Can we include it? Or like they seem to want it included. Is that a problem for us? I don't know. I'll leave that up to your discretion to see if there's any unintended consequences of that. Yeah. As per the catchphrase.
But one thing we do need to go back to now that we know there is going to be a change. What do you want to do about the one-way?
Well, if there's nothing further to add following this morning's hearings.
The only thing that becomes abundant, all the submitters talk about education and teaching people, and even with the licensing laws around the restriction of drinks and having, especially for sports clubs, and having the right personnel on hand to actually know the rules and doing it, that's something that is part of the whole process. That's probably more important than actually, once you've got the rules, people have got to understand and know them, because a lot of our licences are volunteers running them. So that's we don't want the volunteers to get into trouble with the law because they didn't.
Yeah, we had a big push. One of our previous licensing inspectors, Helene Fass, ran some seminars for clubs which were very, very successful, explaining all their responsibilities and what have you. And I think even now the existing inspector does spend time with clubs explaining it. The difficulty for us with limited resourcing is that often that turnover in clubs is high. But it is something that we're mindful of and that we do as resources allow. With the actual licensed premises, they've got legal requirements to provide training, and they have to demonstrate that that's been carried out as part of their licence. But I agree with you, it is an important thing.
So do you want FEMCA to research the Club New Zealand wording, if it's applicable or not? Or leave it the way it is?
It says it is. It's
Okay.
there.
Okay. All happy? Okay.
These are all the, maybe just as a summary, these are all the topics we discussed. As we've written it down, it is the trading hours for on licenses and then specific the footpath that you are wanting to make a change to. This is just the, that will mean that we will redraft the policy with this change, and we will go out for consultation on with the draft. And the next that will roll out, there's a bit of uncertainty what with the amendment bill coming into place, what the next steps exactly in the process will be. But we will, as soon as we know anything more about that, we will get back to you on that.
Okay. Russell.
Thank you. And then we do have the question of if we're going to extend the outside dining, are we going to include Methven in the one-way door policy through till 1 o'clock as part, since we're already going out for consultation anyway? No, we didn't. We were coming back to this topic once we got to here.
Okay. So we need to go back.
Yeah, because they came back and it's the brown pub and the blue pub both have one-way policies. Yeah.
No, the brown pub and the blue pub have the one-way door policy put on them by the DLC.
Okay.
So since that's the case, are we saying we should just do it anyway, especially now if we're going to go to 1 o'clock closing for the outside area?
Only one pub's got up there's got the one-way door, isn't it?
No, sorry,
two have.
Rick came back and clarified it's also the brown pub.
Oh, okay. Yep. So can we just have clarification what that change is? I just missed hearing it. What
For the
changed?
one-way, for the
Oh, the whole, what are we changing?
Yes, the
whole policy.
The trading hours for the footpath area currently are from 7 to 12 a.m. midnight, and the request is to change the footpath area maximum trading hours from 7 to 1 a.m. midnight.
Yep.
For the whole district.
Yes, that applies to the entire district.
Yep. It's the only change.
Yes, so for the one-way door policy, just to confirm, there's no changes there, as the only change is the footpath area.
I think some of the councillors want to change the one-way door to the whole district, not, or to include Methven.
Thank you. And I'm thinking that it's possibly both the blue and the brown pub because in the past it was owned by one owner, so they still is. Not till September, I think. Yeah, so maybe that's why they were both included. But if we're going out for consultation anyway, I don't think it would hurt to ask that question. About the one-way door, whether it is blanketed for the whole district or Methven is discretionary.
Decision so that we know what we're going.
Yeah, okay. So one of the two.
Well, Robert Reid was quite adamant that it should be the whole district, wasn't he? And if we do say it's the whole district and it's a Heinz and it's not really relevant, well, that's fine. They run their business as they run their business and they're shut, so it doesn't really matter or whatever. So I would be in favour of making it the whole district.
I support that.
Probably, yeah, I would support the whole district. Oh, sorry.
So, yeah, so sorry, you were going.
Yeah, I'd support the whole district because I think the biggest killer of our young people is driving on the roads when they've had too much liquor or going to get alcohol or doing it. And if you think about it, if you're in Methven and you can't get into the Methven pub at 1 a.m, but you could get into Ashburton or you could get into Hines or Mayfield or somewhere else, it's a bad thing for you to being able to drive there to do that or, to get in and out. So it's probably not a bad thing to have a one-way door policy everywhere. Then it does put everybody on a level playing field and it makes the host keep them safer in that later period.
Lane.
Same reason, one rule for all.
Yep.
And no changes in that.
Rob?
Yeah, definitely support that.
Okay. So the feeling I get is one-way door policy for the whole district. All in favour? All happy? Okay. Thank you.
Yes, that's brought us to, I think, to the end.
Okay.
So we'll go away and draft all that up again and work out a consultation timeframe. And I guess if there's any other questions, we're happy to answer them at this point.
All happy? All happy?
It's quite hard.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, councillors. Thank you to the two down there that took us through it. So, meeting's closed.
Yeah. Mark, can you ask Lily to switch off? Thank you.